of the Board of Education as an open working session to review the budget, scheduled for Wednesday, or I should say rescheduled to Wednesday, January 28th. If I present is Mrs. Eileen Lou McCormick, Mr. Mark Patton, Ms. Donna Carnell, Mrs. Jessica Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer, Mr. John Convertito, Mr. Paul Fattabine, Mrs. Jennifer Maxon Kennelly, and Mr. John Llewellyn. If I could ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A couple of items, if I could bring to your attention. First, because of the snowstorm, we had to post an agenda for tonight rather than for Tuesday night, and we had added the section of pages 127 to 173 to the agenda for Tuesday night. But when we posted the updated agenda, we changed the date but used an old agenda, so we did not include the review section support information pages 127 to 173. So since we'll be talking about them and should officially add them to our agenda, I would ask for unanimous consent of the board to add review section support information pages 127 to 173 to tonight's agenda. It requires 6 votes, and so therefore if anybody wishes to object, we'll take an official vote. Hearing no objection, then it's so ordered. And so the agenda that is at the back of the table is the agenda that we'll be following. And for those of you who may have an eagle eye and look at the posted agenda, you'll see that that's the only thing that has changed. The second thing is that for tonight's meeting, since essentially the sections that we have not reviewed are up for discussion, but any board member can talk about the entire budget as well, that I thought what I would do is go around the table and take 2 rounds, if you will, that will probably each take an hour. If we can, if I can suggest that each board member look at 7 to 8 minutes worth of conversation, questions and answers included in that, and then we'll move on to the next board member, and that should give us 2 rounds, and then we'll see where we are at 9:30, and then decide if there's any adjustment to that process. So that's how I'm approaching it tonight. Also, you have in front of you some revised documents on the medical retention fund. As you know from last year and in past years, as we get added information, both on the pension side and from the medical retention fund, the number that is required to be budgeted can change, sometimes up, sometimes down. And so this has new information in it that will warrant consideration and discussion for tomorrow night relative to a change in the budget. And I'll ask Dr. Teitel to explain what you have in front of you so that you know what's happening.
Ready?
Yes.
Actually, Mrs. Munsell is going to help with this. The document that's on top, Medical Retention Fund 1516, is an update which includes 2 columns for December expenditures. Previously, the experience had been through November experience. So this updates it by a month. The backup for this is the second 2 pages, the renewal projections from Aon. Translating it into our profit and loss statement, and then going with the suggestion from the First Selectman and the Chairman of the Board of Finance that we budget to completely cover our costs next year. This would require an additional appropriation by the board, additional $284,471 be added to the board's budget in the health insurance line. That's the bottom line of what all this means. To show the complete picture, now that the Board of Selectmen have approved the security funds, at least most of it, we've taken the liberty to show a more realistic expectation of where we would finish 14-15. That's column 8. So you'll see the 160 is there, the 700, and the new estimated gross cash at $1,263,291, which would leave us at not one time the IBNR, but under by $447,289. To maintain that same gross number of $1,263,291 in the next column, then you would need to add 284,471, and that makes it the math balance. We also increased the IBNR slightly because the experience worsened slightly, and so that's where that leaves us in those two columns. Now, I present this as this holds it harmless, but the board can add any amount it wants. I mean, it's up to you. I was just showing what it would look like, because if you look at column 6 and 7, the basic rule that they were looking for was if you're going to end the year with $1,541,330 in column 6, then to cover your cost for the following year and end up at $1,541,330, what does that require? And the new projections require more. So that's in the the backup is behind it. The reasons for it. Obviously, you haven't had time to study this, so just sort of got it really organized today. Yesterday was pretty much a lost day, and Monday we're finishing all the other work. So that's where we stand. So that's on the bad news side. On the good news side, I learned today, and we'll have an exact figure tomorrow, that the town has received an updated pension calculation for what our annual required contribution is to pension. And typically that required contribution does go down in the second run through the system. And it has gone down, and Mr. Mayor is going to give us what that number is tomorrow morning, and we'll get that out and we'll have that available. So it could be that these things wipe each other out. It could be that there's a net difference, but the board will have the opportunity to adjust those two lines based on the latest information, which in the past the board has not been able to do. It's been set, and then the Board of Selectmen or someone down the road does it. So that's the overview of it, and if specific questions on it, I'll have to have Doreen explain in more detail.
So what I would suggest is that we begin our rotation of questions, and those of you who may want to ask about the medical retention fund, ask away, but if you want to ask about another portion of the budget first, it's your choice as to where you start with. So I think I started with the ends last time and then to the middle, so I think I'll start with Mr. Patton and walk around that way, and then I'll start with Mrs. Maxon Kennelly on the reverse side and walk back around again, and we'll see where we are at 9:30. So, Mr. Patton, you're first.
Does the medical retention fund questions count to my 7 to 8 minutes? All right, so quickly.
As does that question itself.
I guess I'll see if either Dr. Title or Doreen can handle this. So bottom line with the fund as is, since we've had a little bit of worst claim, is A, we still have 4 months left for things to go up or down, so this is by no means in stone, as it is every year. And B, hypothetically, if things remain the same, if we did not add money to the budget in this fund by tomorrow, I guess, would that then fall to the other town bodies to do such a thing? Or at least the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance that can add quantities?
They could add to it, but based on our experience last year, when right after the board approved the budget, the experience got significantly worse, they didn't. So I think they kind of looked to the Board of Ed to make that number up over time. And the discussion last year was that the Board of Ed is not under an obligation necessarily to make it all up at once. It looked like we were going to get there. Now that the experience has worsened, we might not. We can't commit to putting any more money in this year. because once we put the 700,000 in for the additional retirees, I can't guarantee there's going to be anything left. So really, this year is what it is. But you're right, you've got 4 more months. Things can get better, and or things can get worse. And if they get better or worse, the other town bodies can adjust them until it gets to the RTM, and then they can only adjust down.
And based on the initial commentary from the Finance Department relative to the pension change, Dr. Title indicated that it could wipe it all out. I'm not sure that that will exactly occur, but a lion's share of it could be wiped out, so the net difference in our bottom line budget might not be a substantial change because of the 284. It may be just rearranging the line items, but that won't be known exactly until tomorrow.
Okay, on to the first question. On some of the ones that I submitted, thank you to Dr. Title and the staff for giving me the breakdown on the school rental facilities and custodial charges related to those rentals. In the legal expenses was another question that I had sent in, comparing the last 2 years. Based on what I saw from the information you gave, it's relatively flat across most categories, and the big bump is special education in the past year, correct?
Yeah, that's fair. It's staying at a high level.
So those charges are not going away anytime soon.
Those
right
charges are not going away anytime soon, and the reason that I proposed adding $75,000 to the legal budget was to try to eat away at the over expenditures in that line, actual versus budgeted.
Do we anticipate going more than that $70,000 over in the current year?
Yes.
Ballpark?
Well, we're going to go $50,000 over because we have an arbitration that
Right.
nobody
that was
anticipated,
unexpected.
right? And we also, contract negotiations, when you do them with the sort of the big bargaining units, are more expensive than the sort of smaller bargaining units. So I don't think Doreen's done a projection yet on that, but I think last year we were over budget by about $150,000, round numbers. So that's probably, could be in the ballpark. Given the extra expense of the arbitration, that's probably a good guess.
As much as I, would ever hate to, other than putting money into the medical fund, adding money to a budget in any year, I'm just wondering if it's not smarter to take another whack with that, seeing as how we always get hammered and then other things get cut back. So that's just an opinion. Another question on page 53, capital outlay. A good chunk of this in the details pages, which are on 106, 107, for those of you playing at home. Most of it is the $2,972 for each of the elementary schools. Is there, maybe there's an elementary principal here in the audience, I don't know, anybody that can speak to roughly what that money will be used for?
Well, the short answer is what they can't use it for is technology.
Okay.
It's a very small sum of money, and it's basically used for things that break, that are equipment. I do see some elementary principals out there, so I'd invite any one of them to come up and illuminate some examples, perhaps, of what you've spent the money on in the past. I see Mr. Chase from Mill Hill volunteering his services to the board. Mr. Volo is being cautious.
There are two
Okay.
seats. There are 2 seats up here.
Okay.
Join us.
Seats. So join the fun.
Let's see. This year I've allotted some of that funding to go to cafeteria tables. So it's typically larger items that, again, as Dr. Title said, not necessarily technology, computers or anything like that, but it would be those those items that maybe have some wear and tear in our buildings that we would need to replace or renew. Teachers' desks, teacher chairs, things like that have been purchased in the past.
Okay.
I would
so-
say the same for Jennings. This year, the money will be going towards library tables, chairs, bookcases, things of that nature. Furniture, usually.
just things that have broken.
Right.
Or are in
Or in
such
need of-
disrepair and need of replacement.
Hopefully the kids aren't sitting on broken chairs at lunch.
I should point out that if you go back to the history of this particular line, way back, the Dark Ages, before my time, all these numbers used to be substantially higher for all the schools. And when those things got really tight, they were really ratcheted down to almost zero. I mean, these guys have been working with almost nothing. And so last year we tried to get the high school and the middle school sort of restored
Right, I
a
remember
bit
that.
because that's where most of the really expensive stuff is, and there's a lot more of it. But the elementary schools have really had a very, very short stick here for a number of years, and we'd just like to try to build it back a little bit so that we don't have issues such as you described.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is we're, even with putting this money in, we're still not back up to what we had for this line item, say, 6 years ago or
Not
so?
even close.
If I may, let's see. This is my 7th year. When I first started, I believe I was somewhere around the range of about $10,000 for capital outlay. Last year was about $2,000. Each cafeteria table costs about $1,000. So you can see that, all joking aside, there are some broken tables. And while children are not sitting on those seats, they are sitting at tables that may have broken seats but just are not on those seats. It is because it takes a while to outfit an entire cafeteria.
Fair enough. I think that's all I have
Okay.
for you guys.
You, gentlemen?
And then my last question, if I can just continue, is on maintenance projects, maybe through the chair to Mr. Cullen, if he's here.
He's made it back from Board of Selectmen. What page are you on?
Page 163. Well, first a comment, then the question. My comment would be, I'm sure you're probably all tired of hearing this. So McKinley, we have to install a dehumidifier system in the kitchen because, for whatever reason, as we always keep finding with this building, that there was just another design flaw, that there's too much moisture built up in the kitchen. How does that?
Yeah, the existing system at McKinley, for that zone, it's not separate just for the kitchen. So what they did is they put an HVAC unit in that's zoned for the kitchen area and some storage rooms and other rooms around it. What we're seeing is, especially during the air conditioning mode, there's just way too much moisture in that area. We've got 2 or 3 floor dehumidifiers in there, and they're constantly running. Normally you want to see those cycle. You want to see them start to pull less and less water. And the custodians watch them, but these aren't. They continue to just grab too much water in the area, moisture on the walls. So we had a professional come in and look at it and said, you really need a separate HVAC system just for the kitchen area. Get the other zones off of it, and you'll be able to control the humidity.
Okay, so it's not just a dehumidification system, it's really another air conditioning
Yeah, it's a rooftop HVAC unit.
system for just that area. Okay, I was wondering why a dehumidification system would be $55,000, and okay, that makes more sense. Then the other HVAC question is the one on the library roof top. Can you maybe give me an idea of every time we replace large units like this, usually over time there's some kind of cost savings. Is there any ballpark on, say we didn't replace the unit versus replacing it, is this a significant type of savings is because the old unit is so poor and inefficient and needs, and also the repairs that it's been going through?
Yeah, I understand your question. It wouldn't be a huge significant savings. It'll certainly be a savings if the controls with it are working better. It's a newer unit that's energy efficient. But it wouldn't be huge. You wouldn't see like $20-something thousand in savings by replacing this unit. But this unit does service a critical area in the school. If you read the breakdown, it's in a location where we need a 300-ton crane to be able to reach it from the driveway. So it's a difficult area. It's a key element and key piece of equipment for that media center and that room and area for all the students and occupants. A lot of our guys, our own technicians in-house, have been working on it. We've called in Controlled Air and some outside companies, and pretty much all of them are saying this unit's shot.
Do you have any idea, let's say, for the last 2 to 3 years, what the repair costs have been on that unit?
I don't have that handy, but we
Okay.
have an excellent work order program. I can pull pages and pages of work orders from responding to that unit and trying to get it running.
How many times a year would you say that that's been
I'd say we're out there maybe 20 times.
a year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
Can
Thanks.
I move on to Ms. Carnell?
You
At
can.
the moment, thank you. Ms. Carnell?
Please. Unless you want some exercise, I'll ask you to come back. I think just continue on with Mark's question, if I may, Mr. Patton's question. And forgive me, I don't know how old McKinley is, but it's the newest school, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's not. McKinley opened in
Back in-
2003.
Okay. I guess, again, why are we having these substantial financial impact of fixing things that should have been done appropriately when the school was built?
Yeah. I personally don't look at it as though we've got a lot of problems at McKinley. You'll have
No, not a lot. I meant
Any issues with a new school?
$55,000 worth.
you'll have any issues with a new school building when you open it. Educational facilities in general, HVAC-wise, are designed in a way that they're zoned. Ideally, if we were a hospital, you'd want thermostats in every room. Educational facilities, they don't do that. They group 4 to 8 classrooms on a zone, large administration areas on a zone. So you'll get long zones. The heat and the cooling has to reach those areas. There will be some temperature swings. It's pretty general. And you kind of work through all of these issues when you open a new educational facility. You work with the control systems, you work with the balancing. We're constantly doing things like that in-house. And then you do find trouble spots in areas where, Burr was a good example. Some of the really high art classrooms were at the end of a zone. So on top of it being a really large classroom with 21-foot ceilings, it's on the end of the zone, so it's the last room to reach heat. It's the last room to get AC. These are the kinds of things we work out and we live with on a daily basis in the maintenance department.
So, just to be clear, to follow up on Mr. Patton, it's not just a dehumidifier. You're changing much more than that. Or can we get that updated or what?
I think it's in the breakdown, but
Okay, because that's fine. I'll find it.
Maybe when we reprint this, we'll rename that to a HVAC.
it's in the
System.
breakdown on page 165. The request will provide a new rooftop HVAC makeup air unit properly sized to provide proper ventilation with dehumidification capability strictly for the kitchen.
Right. I think the part, I get the point here. I think that we should rename it in the page 163, and then also just carry that name over, and we could say new HVAC system with dehumidification, and then it will be clearer to
Sure.
people what it is. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you. That helps clarify it.
Doreen's taking notes.
And if you figure out how to balance, you can come to my house. We still haven't balanced. No, I'm finishing this.
Okay.
Thank you. No, I didn't mean I'm
You're not,
finished. I
you're
meant
just finished with Mr. Collins.
I've been up for 3 nights.
If I can interrupt just for one moment. not to play favorites among staff, but I have it on some information that Mr. Fickey probably has a longer travel distance and may wake up sooner than some because he has to be worried about buses. So in the first round of questions, if you have transportation questions, I am sure he would appreciate it if you covered it in the first round and it wasn't the last question of the night that you asked Mr. Fickey on transportation.
You know, I don't, so if you want to take...
Oh, no, we'll just
if
do
you
it in
want to
rounds.
lead with somebody else, I
Oh, no,
totally
we'll just do
respect.
it in rounds, and
Okay.
if you have a transportation question, just ask it in the first round, that's all.
Okay. I guess, again, going back to Dr. Title through Mr. Dwyer, I know the legal costs have gone up, and clearly we got hit with an unexpected $50,000 legal fee, unexpected. But in doing a budget, is there any way that we can look at these legal costs, because they seem to be going up, as everything does, but is there any suggestions or anything that we can do to look at these legal costs and say, how can we help them?
Well, we ask ourselves that all the time, and we try to use attorneys only when we absolutely have to. But if you're going into a PPT or some sort of hearing and the other side is represented by counsel, then you really have to have, counsel on the other side. And we're seeing, large increase in that arena. Wherever we can get legal advice, say from CABE or somewhere where it's, doesn't cost us anything, we do that. That's why we try to get a lot of our policy advice from CABE wherever possible, but sometimes it's even beyond their expertise. So we talk about this all the time. We're not spending money willy-nilly. You really have very little choice in a lot of these. And so I really don't know exactly what we can do. But it has been something that's been going along above budget for a couple years now, and in years where we don't have negotiations, or as many negotiations, you might expect it to go down. So I would expect that the non-special ed part of it next year would go down, because we don't have a lot of negotiations right now on the table, so that's why I didn't put in for the full, say, 150 that we might need. So I put in the 75, hoping we could contain it and we wouldn't have as much. But you just don't know. You can get a couple cases out of the blue that can be $30,000 or $40,000 without trying too hard.
Are we allowed to tap the resources of the fellow board members? The two lawyers on the part of the board?
Oh, I thought you were asking if we could get their credit cards.
I'll take
If
that
they would
too.
help pay for the legal fees, or
Pro bono.
I think they give us their advice for free.
I agree. Next question, and I appreciate it, that it looks like we're going to be rolling out mid-March in terms of the question about the online reporting. Where has that been allocated in the budget?
I'm sorry. Which line is that in? Security? Security line.
Security and safety.
Security and safety. It's the
Within the central office.
the $300,000 line, or the famous 160 is part of that, right? Sort of the general security line. You want to identify that in the budget for us? Can you get us a page number?
So Doreen will get a page number for you, but why don't you ask the next question? Oh, okay, okay.
It's obviously related to. Excuse me.
It's on page 81.
Bottom of the page.
Okay.
Okay, thank you about that. In terms of the world language, I have to tell you, I sat there, looked at what the presentation we had, looked at the budget, and looked at my answer, and none of it, to me, I can make sense of. So forgive me if it's much more orderly than I think, or I'm in good company and nobody else could make sense of it. I believe that we had a presentation some time ago, and forgive me, it has been some time ago, I'm not sure how much detail that presentation went into in terms of even books. And then when I look at it, I'm just trying to understand where the hope of the district is in going in terms of world language. So maybe you can clarify a little?
Sure, and give it my best shot. So in November, we gave you a written proposal about what our thoughts were on where we wanted to take the world language program out into the future. And we gave different prices to different components of that. And at the time, we were trying to gauge a sense of the board of, what you think we could do with this. It was a proposal that would eventually give us world language in grades K to 12. Eventually. And and there were different prices to different parts of that based on staffing. It was our belief at the time, and with the consultation of the world language teachers and Dr. Boyce, Mr. Rafferty, and the two world language coordinators, that the best place to start on this was in 6th grade. That we didn't want to start in kindergarten or 2nd grade and then, for whatever reason, not be able to fund something or get a full-blown program going in elementary, then drop them into a half a program in 6th grade, which is kind of what we have right now. Right? Yeah, so it's every other day in 6th grade right now for 25 minutes in the middle of the language arts block. So our first priority, as we outlined there, was to implement the full-blown, full period of world language, treat it like another academic subject, the way it is in grades 7 and 8, and put that into place in grade 6, and add the French as an option for kids. Because the feeling was that French is at a disadvantage when kids go into middle school. They continue with Spanish, and then in 7th grade you ask them to switch. And that was costed out, and that's what we ended up building into the budget. And that's our belief about what the best approach is. And we had said in that presentation that should the board want to extend beyond that, that the next part of the presentation, the next add that we are recommending would be, if you wanted to add to 3rd grade, and then if you wanted to do more than that, add to 2nd grade and so forth. We did not want to add in 4th and 5th grade because of the time lost in that grade to core instruction, and that if we could build out the program in the other grades and leading into 4th and 5th grade, the kids would be in good shape for the full-blown 6th grade program. So that was the proposal. And so subsequent to that, there were a couple questions. One was, well, what if we wanted to go to 4 times a week in 4th and 5th grade? What would that cost? We gave that out at the last meeting. I think that was Ms. Lou McCormick's question. And I want to be clear, we're not recommending that, but that was a question. And then the question was, what would it cost to add in the other grades at different levels? So that's what's on this page. But it's also in the document that you got in November. It costed out each of the other grades. Yes. So there's costing in there. So that's our recommended plan. Now, I'll have to say that, we don't have as fully fleshed out an elementary plan as we might want, and part of the reason of maybe not jumping into that right away, other than the fiscal implications of it, which are, tremendous, are that we'd really want to, have a real well-articulated elementary program before we jump into it, and it's possible that could change still. And so we didn't think we were quite ready to go there yet. And the 6th grade part really is the linchpin of this. And we would just love to get that part fixed this year. And I think that's going to be a stretch for us anyways, going forward to the other town bodies. And we think that with adding the reading positions in the 6th grade, we're going to cover ourselves in terms of the world language. But that we are very reluctant right now, without looking at the whole picture, of adding at the elementary level. And so I think we've laid out all the different costs, and If somebody wants to propose adding it at the elementary level, then that's your prerogative to do so. But at this point, that's where we are on it. Does that help?
A little, un poco. Okay. That's about as much Spanish. I started in kindergarten.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Because I'm totally.
Okay, can I just clarify where we started from before the cut to world language, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago? Did we have full 6th grade at that time? And we didn't. We only had the same every other day, is what Mr. Patton is indicating to me?
No, we had.
We had 4 days a week.
Yeah, we had 4 days a week. I think it was 4 days a week, and it was also inserted into the middle of language arts time. So that was cut in half. So 6th, 5th, and 4th were all cut in half.
They were all cut in half.
All cut in half. Yes.
So even if we add back the 6th grade as is currently recommended,
we're going
right.
actually beyond where we were before. We're actually putting a better program in 6th grade than the one we had before, because this will be every single day for a regular class period of world language
so
in 6th grade.
it would go from 4 days
to 5 days.
to 5 days.
And a full period.
And a full period. So that's
40.
So it's 40 minutes.
Yes, this is a substantial improvement on 6th grade. That's why I was saying we didn't want to just go back to the old system. We actually think this is a better system than the one we had, and there was no French option. In the old,
no French option.
Right. So it used to be, again, inserted into language arts. So it had a detrimental effect on language arts because teacher might teach language arts and then get interrupted by Spanish and then come back, and it was kind of discombobulated. So this gives it its own dedicated period in grade 6, 5 days a week, just the way it is in 7th and 8th. The 7th and 8th program is a full-blown academic program, right? Am I saying that correctly? Okay. So Meg's nodding, so the answer is yes. So that basically what we're saying is put 6th grade on par with 7th and 8th. It's beyond where it was before. Okay.
Okay, and from a cost perspective, is this kind of bringing back about how much, like 2/3 of the cost that we had saved from the prior year?
Well, when it was cut, it was cut in 2011 dollars, so
Right.
it's hard to say. I think I have to go back. I would say that this probably restores on the balance, I'd say probably 50%, about half, because we're,
So the cost of this is, I'm sorry,
yeah,
for this proposal, it's, what is it, 100 and,
the proposal that's in the budget for world language costs, including the books for 6th grade, was what is it?
290,000, 291,000 for the staff and 56,000 for the books, and that's on page 154,
so it's 291, and the savings,
Plus the books.
plus the books.
that's including, or?
No, plus the books.
Oh, and books, I'm
So
sorry, was how much?
346,
So
347.
346 in total.
347,
347.
rounded.
And so that's approximately is that approximately the amount that we saved when we cut world language initially?
No, we saved about a little over 500,000, if
Oh, we
I
saved
remember
500,
correctly.
okay. So we're still 150 short of investing in world language from where we were 2 or 3 years ago, dollar-wise.
More than that, because it was 2011
You have to count inflation onto that as well.
Right.
I said approximately, so you can.
Well, yeah, I don't think that
clarify
I
whatever.
don't think I intended to represent this as a full restoration. I think that my feeling is that we need to layer this in, it'd be just simply because of the finances, as well as being able to think through our elementary program completely. And when I that was in fact the way I was sort of reading a majority of the board when we presented it. Obviously, there are people that would want more than this. There might be people who don't see this as a priority. So we thought this was takes a really good stab at it. I think it signals that it's a priority for the superintendent and the board, and we really want to shore this up in 6th grade, and then we can take another look at the elementary program for the following year's budget. And that was my thinking on it. Obviously, if the board thinks I'm not going far enough, then the board can always add to it, and if the board thinks I've overshot the mark, you can subtract from it. That was our thinking.
No, thank you. That clears it up a little. I just have a few more questions. In the November...
Related to world language, or?
Yes, I'm continuing on the topic. In the November handout, it says the textbook cost for grade 6 would be $100 per book. And here you make reference to, I believe it's 80 per book. And I
Right.
know that's $20, but are we going to be seeing a book so that we know what the cost will be?
Yes.
And I think that's just for a sixth grade book, am I correct?
That number is just for sixth grade. We're carrying a much larger number for all of what we call level 10 and 20 for 3 languages in the budget, and that's one of the biggest investments we're making in world language. If you add that to
Right.
this, we're making a pretty, in fact, I would say that, we're making a significant financial investment in world language in this budget. If you look at the amount of money we're putting in for textbooks beyond just the sixth grade, and you add that to what we're adding for sixth grade, you're getting up there to a number that's in the vicinity of $600,000 of new money for world language in this budget.
Just when I thought I understood it, because you have text and materials for world language
Yes.
6 to 12 at 215,000. That's what.
Right. So it's a big number.
Yeah, no, it is.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand.
Right. So it's not all of that is related to the sixth grade.
Right,
That's
6
just,
to
that includes
12.
the sixth grade. I think that we had a placeholder in there in November, and then as Dr. Boyce did further investigation as to the sort of more actual cost of textbooks, we were able to lower it. But this would go through the regular approval process for textbooks. So we intend to bring you a curriculum on world language for grades 6 through 12 in the spring. And we intend to bring a textbook for your adoption in the spring as well for those grades. So you will see all of that before it happens, but we need to budget it now so we have the money
Right.
in
No,
hand.
that really helps. And then I guess just, if we're going to be hopefully giving back to the sixth graders, I believe now that cuts into their English time, language arts time.
It does a little bit, but I think it uses the time more effectively. The kids that still need the double period will still get it because we're going to hire reading teachers as well as world language teachers, which is also in the proposal. And we're not going to have the language arts instruction interrupted. It's going to be continuous.
Right, that's what I was wondering.
So I think it's a better use of the time. But you can't create time out of thin air unless we're doing a high school schedule. Then we created time out of thin air.
We hope.
Passing
Okay.
time and lunch, but there was no such time to be crafted there. So, yeah, there is, somewhat of a reduction, but I think it's more of reordering it.
Right.
And, there's no question that, the kids that need the double period will still get the double period.
Okay, that's why the continuous need for those English teachers.
Exactly. That's why we need the additional reading staff, because the kids who don't go into world language for that period would go into reading.
Okay, no, thank you.
Can
Now
I
think
ask,
I
can I
finally
ask
have
one more
it.
question?
All right,
Wait a
good.
second, Ms. wait a second.
Yeah.
If you could, wait.
Yes.
Can I move, well, because of the, trying to get every board member in with a certain amount of time, can I move on to Mrs. Gerber? We'll be coming back a second round.
Before we leave the topic,
Oh,
though, I just
No, I
wanted-
know it. So, Mrs. Gerber, please do. On the world language, please ask.
while we're on the topic, I just want to understand, so the reading teacher allocation that you just mentioned, is that part of the 291?
That is part of the 291.
And how much of the 291 is the
So
English
it's
reading?
1.8 FTEs. It's 0.6 in each school.
Okay, so what is the value of that in dollars? I'm sorry.
I don't know. Ann can calculate it for you.
Somewhere around 100, a little bit more,
A little more than $100,000.
and maybe, I'm guessing.
110?
Estimate. Right.
Okay, so then the actual world language investment is really 180 on world language instruction, and 110 of the instruction is on English language arts. Is that about right?
Approximately.
So really, it's 180 on world language instruction that we're investing. I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
Right.
Of
Thank
this
you.
investment, so it's not really world language, this is partially world language, and then you're adding supplemental for English language arts.
You've done the math correctly. Whether one is tied very much to the other is, who
It's a
knows?
package deal.
Yeah. Mrs. Gerber?
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions regarding enrollment. So this would be looking, I guess first, the elementary school enrollment, which is pages 130 through 133. I just noticed here that, well, first of all, I see that according to where you think you'll be in 15-16, that Holland Hill has an additional 14 students. 420, they're up to 421 from 407.
Yes.
And I also see that their first grade and their third grade, especially the third grade, is right on the cusp of possibly needing a new section.
They're both on the cusp.
Right. Well, oh yeah, they are, right. Okay.
They're exactly on it.
Exactly. So I guess, and seeing how their enrollment seems to be growing, first, just in terms of the space of the school, I know they are already really tight. If they were to get 2 sections, is that a problem for that school? And I guess also just in terms of, staffing, because that would then add 2 additional teachers. And I think there was one other school, I think Jennings in 4th grade was kind of close as well. But especially knowing Holland Hill and the space issues,
Right.
I just wondered if you...
Well, we'd have to, we have to be creative over there.
Right. No, I understand. I just was curious just to see, that kind of set off a red flag for me.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think we've actually mapped out both Holland Hill. I think Mr. Cullen did that. We actually have a map of the school with every space and what it's currently being used for. And I mean, typically what happens is you end up taking, say there's a classroom that's maybe split into 3 and it's being used by specialists for different reasons. Those specialists get displaced and it becomes a regular classroom again, and the specialists end up in very cramped spaces. They end up in the hallways. It ends up being an Osborne Hill.
Yeah, yep.
You're familiar with it.
I know it well, yes.
So we always, the first priority is obviously to ensure a regular classroom for the kids. It's usually the specialists that get bumped, and you end up with people teaching on the stage, and you end up with all kinds of things you don't really like to do. On the more general picture, there's always, when we do this, a snapshot in time. It's a projection done by our demographer, and it's always possible that sections will need to be added or subtracted across the district. And what we basically do is, for budget purposes, we just line it up exactly the way the projections go, and then basically by August, probably around mid-August, is the final cut. And all the ins and outs are calculated, and the elementary team meets, and they determine what's needed to meet the Board of Ed guidelines. If that means adding a couple teachers, then we add a couple teachers. If it means subtracting teachers, we subtract. And we just factor that in to the staffing and the budget for that year. But we'll never, I hate to use a double negative with an English teacher out there. We will, what's that?
Shakespeare did it.
Shakespeare did it, okay. I don't know. I don't know if that was an insult.
You're eating into Mrs. Gerber's time with...
Okay. We will always add a section if it exceeds the board's guidelines, even if we have not budgeted for that teacher.
Right, yeah, no, I understand.
Okay.
And I know because that has come up before. I
Yes.
guess with Holland Hill, knowing the space issues there,
Right.
I guess my question was not so much as about will there be staffing, but
Right.
is there a
Is
place
there
to
actually
put
space to put them?
the staff and the students? And I guess that just, again, knowing that that is something that
Right.
we've
We'll
been
have to
looking
take a look at that, but there's very little we can do about it.
No, and I totally understand that, but it put a red
But you're
flag.
right. You've got 2 that are right on the edge,
Yes.
and none that are particularly close to collapsing.
No,
Yeah, that school is a hot spot right now.
yeah. And I was excited to see, I think for the first time ever that I can recall, Osborne Hill right now is supposed to be under 500 students, which is just really kind of odd after all those years. And then, so I guess my other question is with the high school enrollment. I know you mentioned briefly about Ward actually projected as of now to be larger than Ludlow
Yes.
next year. I mean,
Slightly.
based on the number that we have right now at Ward, I mean, that's an increase of 86 students.
Yeah, it has to do with where the feeder schools are coming in.
Right.
And what they're bringing in, and then what's going out in 12th grade.
Right.
It's a pretty simple formula. The other piece of it is that, the enrollment projections also mirror attrition that's happened at Ludlow. So in some ways, the Ludlow has more attrition than Ward, 8th and 9th. And so that gets captured in the numbers.
Right.
Again, high school numbers can vary, and depending on where the kids are is where we put the staff. So if it turns out that, and I'll say the same thing about high school staff, because we look at this in April, once the courses are selected, we ensure balance so that the class sizes and the section loads are approximately the same in both high schools. And if that means swapping FTEs between the two high schools, we do that to make it balance. And then if something really surprises us over the summer, a whole bunch of kids come in that we don't expect, then again, we adjust there and make it up on the fly. So we don't build any reserve. There used to happen here in the district. There used to be a reserve pool of teachers in the staffing plan, and I guess the town didn't take too kindly to that because we could never identify exactly where they were going. So there's no contingency of FTEs here, but occasionally we'll have to add, and sometimes we can not fill a certain position depending on the enrollment, and it generally comes out pretty close to what we've said, but there's no contingency somewhere where we've put 2 teachers in case we have extra needed.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay, and then I had a couple of questions for Mr. Cullen on the maintenance.
Mr. Cullen, come on down.
Well, right now I'm looking at page 166, the 2 projects at Tomlinson. And I guess I was just curious, so these were things obviously that weren't done with the big renovation at Tomlinson,
Actually,
or were they?
the 8 classrooms on the 3rd floor were retiled, but they were retiled over the old wood subfloor.
Right, and there were the problems.
and
Now, is
floor
this
joists.
something that, there were other classrooms that this happened, or is this brought to us before and then taken, because this rings a bell. I remember seeing pictures with the
Yep.
tiles.
Good
Yes,
memory.
you've seen this before.
I have, okay, but these are different classrooms?
Yes.
Okay, so it's...
We had trouble in some corridor areas. That wing of Tomlinson has the old existing wood floor joists and wood subfloor.
Right,
That's how old it is. And they opted to tile right over it. What we're finding is that the subfloor is loosening from the joists. So we want to tear off the flooring, put new subfloor down, glue and screw it to the joist to make it tighter, and then retile it.
okay, so this is basically fixing something that became an issue during the Tomlinson renovation?
Correct.
And the ones that have already been done, they're,
They're fine.
They're
Well,
good
one
now?
was on a lower level, we did concrete.
okay,
We were able to pour concrete and then retile it. The corridor area, we did do what I just explained.
okay.
Glued
And
and screwed it.
it's all been good?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the carpeting at the Ludlow, the main office, guidance, and Wright House, how old is that carpet?
We were talking about that today. I believe it's, in some of the areas, it's 14 years, and in some of the other areas, it's 17.
So this is all from before the high school was
Yes,
reopened?
before 2003, the
Right.
renovation was done.
Okay.
We normally like to see carpet in heavy use areas around 7 to 10 years,
Okay.
so these are well over that.
And then, and you want to replace it with something that will last 15
Correct.
years? Okay.
For a
And,
couple of areas, we're recommending a VCT, vinyl composite tile. There's a heavy use area near a copy machine that you can see is worn from traffic, foot traffic. We're going to recommend tile there, but anywhere where it needs to be soft and quiet, libraries and guidance suites, we do carpet.
right, with the sound absorption, so. And then also, having heard some neighbors talk about it, I was excited to see the HVAC on the sound panel and enclosure, the one on page 169.
Yes.
I know that that's been an ongoing,
There are several
Topic.
families and neighbors there that call me every year.
yes, yeah. And I know that they
That-
were at a meeting about the Ludlow project, and they
Yeah,
were talking
that
to Mr.
turns
Moore
out to be an
about that.
extremely large unit, too.
Right.
Normally, we can get away without soundproofing some HVAC equipment, but that Webster wing has an extremely large unit, and when it fires, it's loud.
Right. And I think that actually is it. I had a couple other questions, but Mr. Patton talked about them. So, thank you.
Okay.
I'll use my time to make sure that I should have reminded Mr. Patton. Did you have a transportation question that you will want to ask? If not, I'll ask Ms. Carnell the same question, and Mrs. Gerber, and then I'll go on to, no, so okay. So you're off the hook, Mr. Fickey, from 3 out of the 9 so far. Mr. Convertito.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I guess it starts page 117. I'm looking at actually summary object code 129, which is broken down further on pages 72 to 74, I guess. Or, I'm sorry, 73 to 75. Specific, 73 to 75. Part-time employment, object code 129. Somebody can go through with the lunch aids and why some schools have them and some don't. 54070.
Yes. I guess I can let the principals determine that. That's part of their allocation, right? All right, so you guys want to take a shot at that? Yes, it's, so just pointing out that the way we budget certain categories is the schools all get a per pupil allocation, and there's certain categories they can put their resources into, basically, and they have control of that. So we have 2 gentlemen that can give you an answer.
Well, let's before the answer, let's start with the allocation.
Yes.
What's the allocation breakout as?
Doreen, what's the allocation per, it varies from level to level.
hourly.
It's in the budget prep manual.
I think it's around $10 an hour.
No, he's talking about the allocation.
Oh, the allocation, okay.
Why don't we go pull a budget prep manual and we can get the exact figure as to what that is. It's,
Doreen, you want to find it in here?
there we go.
I'm handing it to you, but you can give it back to Mrs. Gerber.
Wow, happens to have her budget prep manual. Very impressive. Right. So, go ahead. Come on up. Yeah. Use a mic.
For elementary, it's 135.
And how about at middle school and high school? Just so.
Middle's 162, high is 475, and Walter Fitzgerald's 380.
Okay.
135, 162, and what's the high school?
475.
475.
And what page is that on in the budget manual?
14 in the
14, thank you.
So that is a budget allocation per student, per school?
Right. Yeah, we multiply that number times the projected enrollment, and that's their allocation for certain items.
To be, yes, and what items can those be allocated to?
Well, you guys can talk about that. Go ahead.
So the choice to have a lunch aid was given to us, and the reason that Jennings chose to go that route was to have our paraprofessionals who had to cover duties, our teachers who had to cover duties, and certified staff to be with kids. So we chose to go the route of having a lunch aid to just basically cover our recess and lunch coverages. So those were the opportunities given to us, and we chose to go that route.
What else do you spend your allocations on?
Gonna say that
We have textbook accounts in the library, replacing books, adding to our collections, professional development, which is very limited. Trying to think other.
You have, on
Materials.
page 5 of the budget
I
prep
saw
manual,
that, I saw
it's,
that, right.
it's listed out. But they have a choice.
So if that's not being spent on lunch aids, it's still part of that 135, so it would be spent on
Something else.
something else within the school system.
It's an
that school.
autonomous choice, yes, at the building level.
Except equipment that's limited by the other equipment line. That's a
Right.
separate allocation.
Separate.
It's just a set number.
But a similar question comes up each year as to why one elementary school line item budget seems to grow a lot and the other elementary school doesn't. And it really is because the principals each make a individual decision as to where to take their allocation, which causes them to look different from one school to another because each principal makes its own choice.
It's actually even further broken down on page 7.
Right.
And the high school, is much larger because they're budgeting for athletics and such.
Is everything in 120, so not everything in 129 is part of the allocation, only certain line items. Is that correct?
Correct.
And my assumption is probably the only one in that is the 54070, the lunch aides.
Clerical extras is part of their allocation, correct?
Correct.
Right. So if they want to bring clerical staff in over the summer because they've got a mailing or they've got work to do in the office,
Right.
because they can bring somebody in, that's part of the allocation. Substitute teachers are not part of the allocation. That used to be, way back, but that's been taken.
If we go, I guess my question is, we're spending just under $80,000 on lunch aides, and in this budget time, I guess my question is, can we better spend that money? And that's going to be a question I'm going to be posing, so you don't
Okay.
have to answer it tonight.
Well,
Okay?
They can answer it.
I think it's well worth the money because we have our certified staff who would otherwise be potentially covering those duties with kids doing interventions, working with students that are struggling, et cetera. So I think it is a good investment, in my opinion.
Okay.
And by certified staff, we're referring to non-classroom teachers, because classroom teachers, by their contract,
Right.
and their lunch time would only be afforded probably about 10 minutes of that time to be out there of the 20 anyway. And I would say that some schools probably have lunch aides, maybe because of population. There probably are ways to outfit and meet the needs of all students at recess if you have smaller populations within that school or class grade levels.
May I
Mr.
follow up on that?
Convertito?
So just to clarify then, these lunch aides are covering in an area where adult supervision is required, it's not an option. So this is a more cost-efficient way of covering it as opposed to a somewhat more expensive para if that were the case, and certainly not certified. But the point being, they're covering something that has to be adult covered.
Certainly more cost effective than having a certified staff member out there.
It's the lunchroom.
And recess, which
are
is obviously a hotbed for
yeah,
school
if I would,
climate issues.
If I would add, it's probably the most difficult part of the day sometimes in our schools. So
I have a follow-on question, if you might.
Constantino?
Along the same lines with the lunch aides, and the purely selfish reasons being on the policy committee, are they trained? Do they take any training along the lines with allergy issues and so forth? Are they required to?
they are required to meet with the nurse and go over the health care list, and they are trained in EpiPen.
Okay.
However, we do have certified staff members, along with paraprofessionals, that are also in those areas, that are also trained.
Okay.
So we don't have just lunch age in our cafeterias are not the only staff. There are other staff in there.
Okay, all right. Along, again, in the same, I guess this goes on to middle school. I'm noticing Fairfield Woods Middle School, tutors $12,000, but no other middle school has that. Is that, again, along the same lines as the allocation? I'm sorry, Tomlinson has 3,000, but Ludlow has 0. For tutors, 54040.
That's an allocation.
That's an allocation.
That's an
issue,
allocation
too?
number 2, yes.
Okay.
Mr.
All right.
Convertito, I think.
You got to follow up on this? Fine.
Okay, Mrs. Lou McCormick or Mr. Patton, did you both have a follow-up, or Mrs. Lou McCormick, you had a follow-up?
I know I've asked this question before, but I'm just curious. So Lunch Aid doesn't have like a certification training. They kind of have a meeting with the nurse to understand the procedures and EpiPen training, correct?
Correct.
In regard to health matters or school climate initiatives and strategies? You're only referring to health matters, correct?
I'm just questioning, in order to be the recess or, lunchroom
No
aide.
certification per se, but certainly we look for well-qualified people, and if we feel there are any gaps in some areas of need, we do try and fill those needs. I can't speak for every school, but I can say that our school psychologists and social worker do a wonderful job of meeting with paraprofessionals and helping guide them through effective strategies for problem solution at
This is
recess.
the lunch aides.
Lunch aides, the challenge with them is that they are hourly, so they're fixed into the budget. So they have on their own goodwill come prior to their time, unpaid, for some level of training, although it's not as extensive as we can go with some of the paraprofessionals.
Right. Okay, so I guess my question then leads to, I have seen in other districts within, other states, where they actually have used parents to come in to help during the recess period. They actually have sign-up sheets, and I understand there's sensitivities regarding, pairing them during periods where they have their own kids, but has that been utilized, given that it's a
But,
free resource?
Mrs. Lou McCormick, asking questions about the budget, but Mr. Confortito, it's still his time, and so I think he wants to reclaim the time so he can go
That's
on
okay,
with
that
the
was just my
budget
follow-up question, and they haven't answered it yet.
I know it, but that's an
I can save
evaluative
it.
question.
That's
not a
okay, I can
budget.
save it and ask it
So save
again.
it when it's your turn. Mr. Confortito, you want the time back.
Thank you. Mr. Cullen, I need you to come back. Back to 163. Fairfield Ward rooftop HVAC unit, 127,359. I read your justification for it, that's fine. My concern is the unit that blew at Ludlow 2 weeks ago during exams. Is that just a maintenance issue that was rectified, or is that something that's going to pop up and come back at us?
No, that was a maintenance issue, and our own in-house licensed technicians can handle that. It was a motor and a belt locked up.
And the sound panel on Ludlow, that's not a replacement, that's something new, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the sound panels in, where was it?
Fairfield Ward High School lobby
Fairfield Ward
and
High School. Those are,
senior lounge is new.
that's new, that's not a replacement.
Correct.
Those two items are new and not replacements. Okay, thank you. I'll yield my time to Mr. Fatterby.
Mr. Fatterbean.
Oh, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Confortito.
May not use all of it. On page 156. You identify your proposal to add additional leadership positions, basically. Additional special education coordinator, teacher leader for psychology and social work, and an administrator at the Walter Fitzgerald campus. And then you have the new responsibilities will be as follows. You have in there the second responsibility being a coordinator of preschool education. Which one of those individuals would be doing that responsibility of those additional leadership positions?
In the proposal, there are 2 additional leadership positions, and then we have a restructuring of the current leadership positions. So currently, the district has the Director of Special Education, myself, a coordinator of preschool and kindergarten special education, a coordinator of 1st grade through 8th grade special education, and a coordinator of secondary special education, which includes providing all of the leadership to the Walter Fitzgerald campus and all of the leadership to our community partnership program, which is our program for students out in the community who are 18 to 21 with significant disabilities transitioning from school to life. If you look at, so what I did here to try to help people understand what I'm asking for and what we're requesting is I took a look at all of, or many neighboring districts and districts who have like populations, and to show you that we are horribly understaffed in the leadership of special education. And I tried to come up with a fiscally responsible way to provide some relief, to provide additional technical assistance to children, to families, and to staff to allow for moving the program forward, providing individual assistance and collective assistance to the faculty. This is a modification from my original that went through the first round with the superintendent because we all understand the nature of asking for additional leadership positions. We all hear, the commentary regarding administration. But it's my belief that we require these positions in order to provide the assistance to the teams on the ground with increasing numbers of students with increasingly complex needs. Earlier, I heard commentary about how are we going to get a handle on legal fees. I think having more feet on the ground earlier with not waiting for the crises to happen is one way to do that. And this proposal covers that. The only reason I put the Walter Fitzgerald Campus Administrator within the special education leadership proposal, and I think I mentioned this last week when I believe it was Mr. Llewellyn who asked, is currently the secondary special ed coordinator is also responsible there. And so while this isn't, the Walter Fitzgerald campus isn't a special ed, solely special ed issue, this position would free up additional time from our secondary coordinator to be able to provide increased technical assistance at the secondary schools. So the restructuring that I'm proposing would have the Director of Special Education, who is also responsible for all of 504, all of McKinney-Vento, all state reporting, and all school climate, by the way, all the school climate issues. We would also have a coordinator of preschool special education who could also assume the leadership for the preschool, overall district preschool, and then look at a K-5 coordinator who could focus on the 11 elementary schools, a 6-8 coordinator who could focus on the middle schools, and a 9-12 coordinator who could focus on the 2 comprehensive high schools and the community partnership program. So I believe that this structure would significantly improve our ability to get to students, families, and teachers earlier in the process before things start to get stuck and we require additional supports. The teacher leader for psychology and social work, this again, in my original proposal, was an administrative position. We discussed it, and we believe that our psychs and social workers need clinical supervision and support. One, in the area of providing far more complex evaluations. Our students, again, are coming with more complex needs. And so we need to up our game in our ability to assess and understand how those disabilities will manifest themselves in school and at home for parents. Additionally, we need someone to help organize and support the clinical supervision around students with mental health issues. Again, last week I heard, I believe it was Mrs. Lou McCormick, who talked about earlier intervention in identifying students who may be beginning to experience mental health issues and trying to intervene earlier. And I believe that this position, while not a perfect solution, would go a long way to helping us do that in a climate where I believe we really need to pay far more attention to those kids and earlier in their lifetime, not waiting for the crisis that comes typically at high school.
Which of the positions?
Cormac, it's Mr. Fatabean's time, so first ask Mr. Fatabean if you can,
Yield some time to...
please, Mrs. Lou
Could I
McCormick.
just, which position were you referring to?
That is the teacher leader for
Thank you.
psychology and social work, which you'll find on page 156. Again, that would be both a person who's doing work on the ground. They could do overflow evaluations or the very complex evaluations for us. But they would also be able to work with our psychologists and social workers to provide clinical supervision in how to better do early identification and intervene earlier with younger students that they see having some of those precursor behaviors that might be indicative of anxiety, depression, and other kinds of early mental health concerns. And that would be the hope of that position.
So if I understand, there are 2 additional individuals, special education coordinator, teacher leader in psychology and social work individual, and the administrator is a sort of a replacement of a dean. So there's new responsibilities being restructured, one of which is the coordinator of preschool education. Have you identified, since it's not one of the 2 additional individuals, have you identified any existing staff member that is going to take on that responsibility?
Yes.
Somebody has that position essentially now,
All right.
but it extends up to kindergarten, which is very awkward. So in other words, the ECC, which is housed at Ward, there's an individual there who's essentially like the principal of that school, who's the coordinator of preschool education.
For ECC,
for ECC.
not for
Not for the whole district.
Pre-K.
Right. So that's the individual who would be the
all right,
likely person in there.
to be that additional
Right,
responsibility.
exactly. 'Cause she's got the preschool
Right, I just-
expertise. That was probably your original question, but it gave Andrea an opportunity to expound. She could be running for
Open the
office.
door, I'll walk through it.
You didn't ask this question, but I'm going to answer this one anyways.
But
Well,
since
because I think it is a whole proposal. It's not an individual proposal.
Right.
So since
I
I
thought I'd
yielded
ask
my
them.
time, and that was a long answer to a short question, I'll give you some of my time.
No, no, I will not take your time. I'm nearing my, I have just a general observation now. If you look on page 128, 128 is a chart or graph of pre-K to grade 12 enrollment. And in my viewing of this graph and analysis, I would certainly indicate that it shows that our enrollment seemed to peak at 2011-2012 and 10,287 students, and has thereafter declined and bounced around somewhat, but a general decline. The other query I may have with this graph or chart is obviously now it's labeled pre-K to grade 12 enrollment. At one time, it was just K to grade 12 because we didn't have pre-K necessarily. And so some of these numbers in the later years may include pre-K, which didn't exist before, which then may somehow skew the actual potential decline in enrollment. So I guess my only comment would be, since a large part of our budget is wages and benefits, or majority part of our budget wages and benefits, I would caution any additional staffing needs in an environment where you might have declining enrollment. That's my general comment with respect to. And that's it.
Okay. Did either of the two of you have transportation questions that you wanted to ask in this first round? Okay, so you ought to go play the lottery tonight. You're pretty lucky so far. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
And I will say, I don't have transportation questions only because in my first year on the board, I asked for the whole bus grid, thinking that I somehow was going to see something that Mr. Fickey didn't, and that was a interesting, lengthy labor, and actually, quite frankly, a fascinating study of how that whole grid gets put together. So, in that regard,
a fool's errand.
it was, but it was interesting to look at. I will say that. But
Knock
at least
yourself
it was
out.
only on my time.
Right.
Actually, I'm curious to have with a follow-up question to what Mr. Fadabine just asked. When this is pre-K, does that include the ECC, and has it always included the ECC?
Yes, the ECC's been there for quite some time. We've had pre-K in the system, but I think perhaps what he was getting at is we've expanded our pre-K.
To Dwight and Burr.
Right, to Dwight and Burr, and that's really the extra, because ECC's always, I don't know if it's always been there, but it's been there quite a while.
Right.
And it's always also taken in non-identified students, which it does now.
Right.
The difference now is we charge tuition, whereas before they used to come for free. So the ECC's always been there. The real additions are Burr and Dwight, which were put in under racial imbalance. I will say that if you sort of track back on our staffing, particularly teaching staffing, if you went back 3 or 4 years and looked at the number of, say, elementary classroom sections, and look at the number now, I mean, it's substantially down. I mean, we have always moved the staff around to meet the enrollment. And so what's happened now is that as the groups of kids move through the system, we've been moving the teaching positions with them. So the certified staff for next year is almost a complete wash. But what you're seeing is a migration of staff essentially from the middle school to the high school as the kids migrate. And so in the aggregate, it doesn't change a whole lot, although it's generally, you generally need more staff at a high school than an elementary school for the same number of kids because of the variety of courses they take. But generally, you'll see, for example, this year, there's a substantial reduction that we're taking in the middle school. It's actually pretty significant. And that's just a function of the enrollment. So we've always, as long as I've been here, wherever the enrollment takes us, that's where the staff go. And if we don't need it, I don't put it there. And so that's why we're about even with where we've been. And I think that chart that I showed in the PowerPoint, which showed the graph of the staffing versus enrollment over the years, the teaching staff has almost perfectly tracked it. And all the other staff has really been flat or declining. So I think we do a pretty good job of basically putting the teachers where the kids are. And it's generally been pretty close to a wash the last few years.
Do you have another question, or is that, you
A
want to
few,
follow
yes.
up on that? Yeah,
No,
please do.
and also just to clarify, the high school salary is more than the elementary school salary. Anyway, so as you're tracking the kids, you might be reducing elementary, even if you're doing a one-to-one match.
Well, they're all paid on the same salary schedule.
I thought they were slightly different.
No?
No? Okay. All right, my
I
other
think that was
questions-
true in like the 60s.
Could I ask a follow-up question on that quickly? If Mrs.
Years of
Mrs.
experience may differ, but...
Mrs. Maxon
yeah.
Kennelly, Mr. Patton wants to
Sure.
follow up?
Yeah, same grid for everybody.
While we're on this topic, this may be a conversation for another day. So obviously, right, so we have the bubble in the middle schools. Teachers will be migrating up to the high schools. But in a sense, in the high schools, they're already, pretty crowded. Every classroom is filled with students and teachers. So if we need more teachers to cover more students, how does that play out in terms of
Space?
Like, I would have thought that class sizes would have just maybe gotten larger as opposed to migrating teachers.
Well, in some cases that does happen. Where there's headroom, you can take more kids into a given class. But there are limits to how many kids we can assign to various classes. There's limits, for example, in science to 24 per class because of the lab and the safety issues. And also individual teachers by contract have limits as to how many can be assigned in the aggregate across their 4 or 5 assignments. That's all described in here in gory detail. So to the extent that there is some headroom, we wouldn't necessarily add space, but if we're pretty well maxed out, where there's not much room there, then we have to add fractions or full positions. And it could be that there's a certain classroom that's in use, say, 7 out of the 8 periods during the day. And so then that classroom just gets used for 8 periods, and that teacher, when they're off duty, instead of being in their classroom, they have to go wander off somewhere else to, when they're not teaching. So, and of course, Ludlow, we really literally are running out of space, which is why we're adding on to the school. But believe me, we scrutinize any additional staff requests from the high school very carefully, Mr. Coyne.
So it literally is just finding rooms that may not be used every single period and
Correct. It's a scheduling,
fit the extra scheduling.
scheduling magic.
Okay.
But there does come a time when you can run out of space. I mean, it's not unlike the Holland Hill situation. And I think we've pretty much hit that point at Ludlow, even with the number flattening out, we're still overcrowded there in terms of classrooms, and particularly in science. We really don't want to skimp there, so.
Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, back to you.
Yes, a couple of questions. Regarding, and this is back, I don't even know if Mr. Cullen needs to come up. Dr. Tyler, you may be able to address this. For Fairfield Ludlow, the exterior-interior key unification project, I'm curious why that wasn't bundled with security.
And you referenced the page that you're on?
I'm sorry, the number is on 163.
Right.
The description follows on 167. Because on the one hand, you can read it as an inconvenience, but it's absolutely, there's an allusion to what it is truly, which would be a security measure.
Well, it's just a matter, yes, I mean, theoretically, we could have done that. However, if it's something that's a multi-year project, we want to start it, we want to make sure it gets done. By having it in the operating budget, we can control that.
Okay.
Once you put it off to the bond, you don't know what's going to happen with that. And that's the risk, is that, if you put it off to a bond, just so you know, the Board of Selectmen decided to fund about 50% of the project because it's going to take 2 years to do it. So we're not really suffering a loss, but, there was a lot of consternation about the size of that number and the fiscal environment, rightfully so. So anytime you're going for a separate appropriation, you run the risk of losing that. So it's really, you know, yes, it could have gone in there. Could have gone in there. We just decided to keep it in here as a, so it's sort of an ongoing project in the system that Sal has been working very hard with the staff on.
Okay.
You guys want to add anything to that? I guess
Well,
not.
Mrs. Maxon-Kennelly said okay, so under the
I'm fine with
theory
that
of...
answer. I just
Yeah.
wanted to...
Answered the question.
Right, it's a strategy question.
Okay.
Yeah.
A separate question from page 160 regarding technology. The $22,000 for the iPads, is that something specific to the needs of the school psychologists and the students that you're not using something that could also then be used for the SBAC?
That's for the WISC, correct? Yes.
Yeah.
So the WISC, the new WISC 5
Okay.
is on iPads, and we'd yeah. So we would need those really exclusively for the use of the psychologists because they're going to be using them on a regular basis. So that's really the point. Is there more to add to that? Was your question kind of like, could they be redeployed if they weren't
Right.
being used by a psychologist?
These iPads are devoted to the changeover from paper and pencil protocols to the new digital formats for assessment. It is both more cost-effective, significantly more cost-effective to move in this direction, and also it really does measure, it uses the assessment in ways that students with more complex fine motor needs we're better going to be able to understand what they can do versus what the paper and pencil makes difficult for them. And we pay the service by subtest, so we can do more cross-battery assessments and pull specific assessments for kids. The reason why they would need to be dedicated to the psychologist is because the applications themselves are proprietary, and so you wouldn't want to have a student being able to open up apps for subtests of the WISC, right, and play in that environment. That's not, that it would invalidate potentially many of the assessment pieces. However, the iPads could be used when available and not being used by the psychologist to conduct the assessment. A speech pathologist might be able to use them to conduct other assessments. So there are ways within the certified staff to share them for use directly with kids, but I wouldn't want to necessarily zip them out into the world for SBAC assessment because we need a security level within the testing applications itself.
And it sounds like they're going to be fairly well used.
They're going to be very
So
well used.
that was really my question. I mean, you used the perfect phrase, could they be deployed elsewhere? And it sounds like they're going to be busy in and of themselves. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My other one. Okay. So a lot of my questions have been taken. Yeah, for my next set of questions are on a different set of pages, so I'll wait till round 2 for that. So I'll
Mr.
pass it on to
Llewellyn.
Mr. Llewellyn.
I have a few follow-ups, I think, on some comments other folks have made. To follow up on Mr. Convertito's question in terms of the kind of discretionary funds at the elementary level and the middle school level, on the school level, does each school have its own checking account as well, or do all checks clear through here?
What's the question?
Does each school have its own checking account, or does every check get written at central office?
Each school has their own student activity account.
Okay, so they've got, and is that a budget item, or is that money collected from students? And
It's not a budget item.
so how's that account funded? Student activity account?
It's funded various ways, fundraising. I don't know, maybe the principals can talk to that more, but
It's not district money?
It's not district money.
Okay, thank
No.
you. That's helpful, because I was trying to understand if they're doing it themselves or if it's all coming through central office, just controls and balances. To follow up on the comment on the 1.8 ELA teachers as part of the world language, one of the things that kind of struck me was that we're taking time that I think right now is a double ELA. Is that correct?
It's double ELA with the exception of when the Spanish teacher.
Right.
Right.
So I would think that we are freeing up English teachers' time, so we shouldn't need to be replacing English teachers with English teachers. Because
Well,
we're
we
actually
don't- we
freeing
don't
up
need-
half their
we-
time.
Yeah, we don't need to replace all of them. I mean, we're talking about 6/10 of a reading teacher per elementary school, 6th grade. So it's a very small number there, and that's based on the number of students. If you take those students and say they were all going to get world language, you would need more world language teachers.
Right.
So since there's a certain percentage that will need the reading, you break that up. I think that's how Ann
Yeah,
Ann
and I
did
think my
it, so-
point, my point, I think, is that those kids this year are in English. They're in ELA now, correct?
Correct.
So those ELA teachers who otherwise would be teaching a double are now teaching a single and have more time to backfill.
I don't think that's correct.
Just if I could follow up, the ELA is being taught by social studies and math teachers as well.
Well, that's a separate thing. They
But
teach, they teach English language arts. I think they all do. They teach English language arts and at least one other class, sometimes two. So they're not teaching English language arts for their full assignment. They're teaching it for part of their assignment.
Back to Mr. Llewellyn.
I don't know. Does somebody
You're
want to
welcome
explain
to
that
ask another
schedule a little
question.
better?
That's okay. I think
Is that
my
yeah,
point, yeah,
right.
no, I mean, I think my point is that we have English teachers now whose schedules are going to be freed up somewhat while those kids are taking language. I don't think we might be able to save ourselves 1.8 on the budget because we already have English teachers, which will now be supplemented with world language teachers.
I don't think that's true. Somebody want to explain why that's not true? Because I don't want to let that just lay there.
Yeah.
To think that we'd have extra teachers with nothing to do.
No, I'm not saying we'd have extra teachers. I'm saying we don't need to add the 1.8 to the budget. We can take that as a savings.
Every teacher teaches 5 periods, and currently in 6th grade, teachers have, most teachers have 2 content areas that they teach, English, language arts, and something else. So by bringing in world language for a full period in 6th grade, the one of the double periods of English language arts would go to world language, but we'd still be teaching English language arts for 1 period. Students who aren't taking world language would need reading support. This is a reading teacher, not necessarily an English teacher. It's a teacher who has a specific certification to support struggling readers as we have in 7th and 8th grade. So the 5 periods that are currently in the team time, the core time, would be divided up into English, math, science, social studies, and world language, or the same 4 plus reading. So it really, we're not giving the teachers of English any additional time because every teacher will continue to teach 5 periods. Now, we do have an overall decrease in enrollment in the middle school, but that's mostly, and that results in a decrease in staffing at the middle school, but that was an enrollment issue. I don't know if
So
that
it's basically
helped.
the staffing is laid out just like it is. We basically ran the staffing out just like you'd staff 7th and 8th grade, and that's how the numbers rolled out. So
Okay,
I don't think it's extra.
Difference of opinion there. Okay, thank you. Another comment I wanted to make on Mrs. Gerber's comment about the loading of some of the elementary schools. I wasn't sure for a minute if you were going to go for redistricting, given that we have, we will next year have, I think, 3 elementaries with almost 100 vacant seats. But I wasn't sure if you were going to go there, but you didn't. To move now to the food service information that you provided to us, as part of the questions.
We have the food service specifically on the agenda tomorrow because the food service is not part of the budget vote that we have to take. So I put the food service conversation that you wanted
Okay, perfect.
on tomorrow's agenda.
Okay, so can we go then, please, to the medical retention? And I apologize, I haven't had a chance to look at what you had put on the desks here in any detail. But if we look at the balance sheets that were sent to us for Fund 63 and Fund 64, 63 being teacher staff, I guess, and 64 being retirees. If I look at the retirees, 64, can you interpret that for us all, please? We start with a beginning cash balance, and I'm assuming that would be an actual at July 1, 2014. Is that the 1,852,000?
Correct. If you add both of them together, the retiree page and the actives page, you would come up with the numbers that are on that, the summary sheet. that you
Okay,
have.
but that's the actual opening balance.
Right.
So then we have budgeted premiums, BOE budget, $1,001,053. And below that, we have retiree premiums of $1,647,000, miscellaneous revenue, and I believe the 187 is probably reflective, Dr. Title, of what you had said the state reimburses? Is that?
No, that's the,
That's the ITT Hartford.
that's the ITT Hartford Medicare Supplement Retiree Plan.
It's
the
a
in and out.
supplement?
Yeah, that's not the state,
That's
no,
not the
that's
TRB
not the
subsidy.
state
Okay.
subsidy.
So those three bottom numbers, the 1,647,000, the 63, the 187, are about 1.9 million. But above that, we have the 1.15, which is budgeted premium. But if I look at next year, we have no number there. So what I see is I have a total revenue and available cash of almost $4.9 million this year, where we have total expenses of $3 million. I'm rounding. But next year we have expenses of 3.2 million, but we only have revenue of 2 million. What happened to that number in the upper right, or how do we get the 1.15 number?
That goes back to your point.
That's why I'm trying to bring it back to understand it.
Right. I combined it for budget purposes because I didn't see the need in the budget. You have to remember the budget number that the board budgets is really a revenue to this, to these both funds, and
Right.
I didn't think there was a need to separate it out. That's your prerogative if you want to separate it back out.
Well, they're separate funds. That's why I ask. So if I look down at the net profit estimated for 2016, does that mean that we are likely going to be funding retirees by $1,183,000? In other words, if our total expense is $3.2 million and revenue $2 million,
That means that even if you don't fund it specifically for retirees, they'll have that ending balance of almost 600,000.
they'll have the ending balance of almost 600,000, but we will have taken that account down by $1.2 million.
Correct.
Okay.
But that's just a feature of not breaking it out, right?
Right, right.
And you could just put the 1,153,000 in there, and then that number would be different. Right? I mean, that's explains it.
Okay.
Just a matter of where that goes, the Board of Ed, right? Because on the actives page, it's combined, right?
Right. And,
So that-
these are fund balances. These aren't cash balances. When Mr. Tetro and Mr. Flynn were here, and they talked about each silo.
Right.
There's only one cash account, really.
No, I understand, but there's bookkeeping that's behind it, which is the funds.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
It's commingled cash.
Mhm.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, that helps me
Can I just
clarify
ask
that.
a question
Yeah, go
for
ahead.
my own clarity? If I'm looking at the 1.917, which is the estimated 6/30/2016, okay, that's the 1.787 from the bottom of the first column, plus the 1.153, is that correct? If I'm beginning cash balance is 1,852, and you break out the 1.153, the cash balance, the ending balance of 1,787, how do we get from 1,787 to 1,917?
It's three lines up, John.
That's not a cash balance.
Right. It's the third line up, 1917.
All right, I'm sorry.
It's a mixing of P&L and
Yeah,
cash.
I'm sorry, I missed the line. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like the other one.
Okay, thank you. I have I guess a different line of questioning. So if we want to move on to Ms. Lou McCormick at this point, especially after, I took up too much time at the last meeting, I'll yield the floor here. I was
Mrs. Lou
reprimanded,
McCormick.
so.
How nice of you.
All right, I'm going to just follow up on some of the commentary that was just had throughout, and I withheld my questions so that we can move around quicker. Okay, so to go back for a second to the 1.8 ELA teachers, just so I can understand this clearly, before the ELA teachers had 2 periods that were interrupted for 25 minutes by a world language instructor. I believe that's correct.
I'm sorry. Before currently, they teach a double period, and 25 minutes of that twice a week is taken off by the Spanish teacher.
Correct.
Right.
All right. And going forward, what would happen is that they would then give up a whole second period. So the second period that they normally taught that was cut by 25 minutes twice a week is now going to be removed in its entirety, so they'll have 40 minutes every day, less ELA. Is that correct?
No, they would be teaching that period, a different group of kids.
So the same teachers right now who teach 2 periods interrupted are going to teach 2 periods of ELA still.
They're actually going to teach 5 periods of ELA.
They're going to teach to different.
Different kids, just like in 7th and 8th.
So where do the additional kids come from in 6th grade that they wouldn't have otherwise had? Aren't we just reducing ELA time?
No,
I guess
so-
I think I'm
I know.
confused about the timing. Like, it's kind of hard to envision.
I know, we need to do a chart or a diagram of the schedule, which I think will maybe help.
Yeah, like I think I can
Yeah.
envision, like, if you can use minutes and time.
So think of it, kids now, rotate to different teachers for different subjects.
Right.
So if you've got 2 teachers who are teaching double periods of language arts right now, there's another teacher teaching a double period of language arts and also teaching science or social studies. There's another teacher teaching a double period of language arts who's also teaching maybe math.
Mhm.
And so you basically look at what each of them is teaching,
Mhm.
and then look at how many little sections you need to teach a team,
Mhm.
and you chop it up that way, and so you end up with basically a team of, say, round numbers, say a team of 100 kids, okay? All those 100 kids might have the same teacher for their core language arts. 20 kids come in, 5 periods a day. And those kids also go to a math teacher who's teaching them 5 periods of math, although some are teaching advanced math and some are teaching the regular math, right? And there's the same thing for science and social studies. So you have the same number of FTEs as you have like in 7th and 8th grade. It's just now they're going to be specializing in what they're teaching as opposed to teaching multiple subjects. And so we would just staff it up the way we staff 7th and 8th grade. So there will be some kids who are not going to get the second language arts period because they're going to be in the full-time world language. The kids who need the second period, the reading, they'll still get their double period. So we're sort of differentiating in a sense, like who really needs that extra time.
No, I understand. I'm just saying.
That's how it plays out. So
The number of instructional time, though, for each student remains the same,
that's correct.
right?
There's only so many minutes in the day, so many periods in the day, and
Right, that's right. And so the
some
only
kids-
thing
yeah.
we're adding, just so I understand, right?
Okay.
Because I need to get it in my words so I can understand it.
Okay.
So the only thing we're adding is that now students have the option to elect world language for that second period instead of remaining in a second period of language arts.
we're adding a full academic period of world language as
Correct.
opposed to a partial.
That's right. So now these kids are fully removing from before they had this one teacher for 2 periods, and now they have the option to take this part of it and move to a different teacher.
They'll have that's right. They'll have a teacher for the one period of language arts and a different teacher
Right.
teaching them world language.
So there'll be fewer kids left in this English language arts column that have the double period of language arts, and there'll be those kids, the balance would be removed to a world language instructor for that period, correct?
That's correct, except for the ones that are going to reading.
Well, so here's my question. Why wouldn't these kids, the reading or whatever, they're doing that now anyways, aren't they? Why is that new?
We need to just diagram this. It doesn't lend itself to a...
Right, I'm just not
verbal
understanding
answer.
why we need additional instruction, because we have this ELA teacher who's there doing it now anyways. So what we're actually doing is not creating an option for just world language. Now we're going to create two new options. We're going to create an ELA option, which is here all along, and then a second option for reading, and then another option for world language. Is that what we're saying? So that we want to create three...
An option.
Well, I'm just saying 3 alternatives for that second English language arts slot that has now become variable.
Yeah, why don't you give us 24 hours to try to put something together that would be more easily explained than I'm walking you through it verbally.
Okay, yeah, because it just isn't clear
Right.
to me how that's world language. It seems like a separate reading initiative.
I understand what you're saying. I think we'll put our heads together tomorrow and try to come up with some way to do it more efficiently than we're doing it right now.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with having a reading initiative. I just like to understand it as such.
Yes, I understand.
All right, so that's
Yes, we're
that's
over
the
to
question.
Mrs. Lou McCormick still.
Okay, back to my lunch aid question. So I guess back to repeat my question at this point. Have we ever considered just utilizing parents to come and, help out during the lunch period? Because I have friends in other districts who basically volunteer during lunchtime they have a schedule where parents sign up. It's a free resource. Parents are interested. They want to help.
Well, I won't speak for the elementary principals. They can speak for themselves, but I think that one, we've got, when people are your employees and they're being paid, they generally will be there at all times, and you can count on them, and they're the same people, and if you train them, they're there. Parent volunteers can be used in schools for lots of things. I'm just not sure that the elementary principals want to use them in the lunchroom, but I'm happy to let them chime in on it. Obviously, we feel that a consistent person in there is very important. Do you guys want to talk about that at all, or not? Or Mike, do you want to talk about it?
Anyway. Please come forward and respond. Mrs. Gerber wanted to follow up on that same subject, so after they respond, can she ask a question?
It's not a question, I just want to provide some clarification.
Well, but it's her time.
Yeah, and
I should point out that we make tremendous use of parent volunteers in a lot of ways at the elementary schools. For example, there's a large number of them that are in use in the libraries, really helping out in there, and that works out really well.
Yeah.
So I don't want to suggest
Yeah, no,
that we're not open to that.
I'm just
but-
suggesting
Mike,
another
do you wanna-
alternative
Please
rather than
comment.
$80,000.
What Dr. Title said is true, and I've worked in other states where we did use parent volunteers, and they do, when they have a better offer, sometimes don't show up. The problem for our principals is going to be a trickle-down effect. So if they've planned to use a paraprofessional to be able to do one task, they may have to pull that person. The second dilemma is we'd have to work with the police department because they're always very nervous if you have a cycle of people that you haven't vetted and talked to. So, I mean, I would really want to discuss that with them, too, before we just open the doors.
Oh, of course.
Everybody come in. So I think that's the second element that's...
I raise it because there's precedent. There's been precedent for decades at other districts, and it's a well-utilized population of people who often are very responsible, usually because they're vested in the kids that are in the school.
We don't disagree with that at all. We
And
just wanna make
so
sure we protect
I want to
those
raise
kids.
that to make sure, yeah, of course, and protecting them against their own parents, I think, may be valid, but I would also say that they could be one of the most trusted people that you could hire. I guess it could go both ways, but I will throw that out because I think that, if we could save $80,000 and try utilizing and partnering with parents more, I think our district could be better.
Mrs. Lou McCormick, will you yield to Mrs. Gerber for a moment?
Sure.
On the same subject?
Well, this is on the same subject because actually we did do that at Osborne Hill School about 11 years ago, and my son was in kindergarten, and it was not very a good use of people's time because you have elementary school parents who normally have younger children who get sick, and every day it became a juggling act where people were supposed to be filling in. They had to cancel at the last minute. We weren't being paid. We weren't employees. If something else came up, things happened. Who was going to schedule it? It became a logistical nightmare. And there were a lot of very well-meaning people who wanted to help but weren't able to commit. And I will say that I volunteered for years at Osborne Hill in the library, and that did give you flexibility. So if something came up, if somebody got sick, If you had an appointment that came up, you didn't show up, some books didn't get shelved, it was okay, as opposed to if you have back-to-back-to-back lunch periods and a couple of parents don't show up, you're scrambling to find someone to replace them. So it became a logistical nightmare to try to schedule it, and it actually became more work in some ways. And so it was shelved, even though there were a number of parents who wanted to do it. The day-to-day operations became untenable.
Well, I will say that I know many districts who do it and still do it. I grew up with one that used it. I mean, very common practice. Perhaps it needs processes, and maybe it needs something that needs to be worked on and figured out. But I will throw it out there because it is a viable alternative that many districts have successfully implemented. I don't know why they haven't, we couldn't, but whatever it is, I throw it out there. And then let me move on to the next one. On to Mr. Fadabine's question on page 156. I'm just curious, back to Ms. Leonardi, what was the total cost impact of those 3 positions? I just wanted to get a definition of the 3 positions, just so I understood.
We might need Ann or Doreen to do that. Ann has it? Because you're netting some things off one of them.
Actually, while they're looking up that number, can I ask a question about netting something that you just mentioned,
Mr.
Dr. Title?
McCormick, do you mind? Please.
Of
Mr.
course.
Mr. Llewellyn.
Dr. Title, when you said netting something off, we were netting off a teacher at Walter Fitzgerald.
Right.
But I noticed the teacher is in the budget but not in the actuals. Are we a teacher short right now? Because it appears as though the actuals are running less one teacher.
We're not that position. If we're running short,
Well,
it might be a...
It's on the teacher line in the budget.
Right, well, the dean would be on the teacher line also. So, Andrea, do you know?
The difference, the calculated difference for the Walter Fitzgerald campus administrator, we took an offset of a reduction of 1 teacher and the stipend for 2 stipends. One, the summer school secondary principal would be assumed by this person, and the online learning liaison stipend would be assumed. So the differential between the 2 is $43,000 and change.
And so what is the total?
And then
What's the total compensation for the what's the total, dollar amount for the administrator?
And still looking.
administrator for the Walter Fitzgerald campus?
Yeah.
It's approximately 125.27 is what we budgeted, somewhere in there.
So the prior position was 43 less than that. Is that what you're implying?
The current teacher who's in the position
Yeah.
has a salary of about $87,000, I want to say.
Okay.
91,
And
66.
then we have 2 people additionally having stipends. Those stipends would go away. So we took the offset of a salary plus 2 stipends,
Okay.
and then we are looking to hire 1 12-month administrator who would assume the responsibilities of both the stipended positions and full-time leadership at the Walter Fitzgerald campus.
Okay. What were the stipended positions?
The online learning liaison
Okay.
and the secondary summer school principal.
So the difference is $43,000. The salary would be anticipated to be in about $128,000. And the offsets, as I said, take away the dean's salary, the summer school principal, the online learning. What's left is about $43,000, $43,700.
Okay. And then how about the other 2 positions? The special ed coordinator and the teacher leader, psychology social worker.
The special ed coordinator would be around that same figure of $128,000. It's in the same salary lane.
I think the budget's 156.
Yeah, there's a range in that salary account. Depending on the experience level of the hired person.
But the number put in the budget's 156, I believe.
Where are you?
I'm just,
Yeah, what
I'm
page?
looking right now.
Admin public, it's 51,170, section
School
62, and I believe it's
administrative
130?
Well, that 156 accounts for the increases for the currently employed 3 coordinators
Okay.
and the new person. So it's not all related to that new person.
Okay.
If you look in that line, there are 3.8 FTE, 2.8 have contracted salary increases, and the 3.8 is their initial salary account. So the 156 isn't all for that one person.
So let me look at something.
It's on page 123, on line, under pupil, account 62, pupil personnel services, line 105,
Yep.
school administrative staff.
And 3% of the prior year's budget's about $11,000, so it's about $145,000 is what that would be. Does that make sense?
Which-
Yep, that makes sense.
It's in the ballpark.
If we could back you up just for clarification on,
Where are we with?
Administrator?
Mr. Convertito, we're with Mrs. Lou McCormick. Are you,
Yeah,
I don't
I
know
just
how
want to
far you
finish
wanna
the,
extend
yeah,
this
right, before we kind of
conversation.
go off. I just want to get the numbers. So the special ed coordinator, did you say was 145 or 128? What was the number?
Lead coordinator salary is budgeted about 145.
Okay, 145. All right, the administrative position was 128, and the teacher, leader, psychologist,
And the
social worker?
psychology is, if you look under line 103 and on that same page, goes under certified support staff, going from 11.2 to 12.2. But that's not, 52,000 is not their entire salary.
Thanks. So this looks like it. So it looks like what's been budgeted is there is $87,000 for the psychology position district-wide.
Okay. All right, so the ask from your world is just those 3 positions, or are there additional positions?
There are some teaching positions at the high school level related to students moving from middle to high school in the more complex learning group.
Okay, and how much was that?
There was 1 position each at each high school, a special education teacher.
One in each high school, special ed. So that's 2?
Right.
Is that right?
That's 2.
And then what was the cost of those 2? I just want to kind of
Average
add it up.
What's the average salary we?
I want to say that we're budgeting the 64, right, about $64,000 for a new
salary and
staff.
benefits.
Okay. And is that it?
Then there are paraprofessionals.
Okay, how many paraprofessionals?
That's all listed out on one of the pages in the book.
Some of this is on page 142.
That's the page, right. 142 has it all listed out by certified and non-certified staff, additions and
Deletions.
reductions.
So it's plus net 3 trainers.
Okay, so 3 trainers.
Yep.
No, because there's an offset. I believe the total increase in trainers is 2,
Okay,
because
2.
there's some subtraction.
Trainer, yep, there's one up top, so it's 2,
They
and
go
then
across to see
the
the
paras are 9.5.
Let's see.
9.5 paras?
And then
Yep.
the instructional
Wait, so
technology
before, I
menu.
just want to understand, so the costing of the 2 trainers is,
Cost of, I'm sorry.
the 2 trainers, the 2 additional trainers being asked?
What was the average cost of a new ed trainer that we put in?
I don't know what the average is. Do you know what the average was? We'd have to look that up. I don't know what the average is off the top of my head for those 2
Okay,
positions.
I'm just trying to, I want to understand kind of what the ask is, because I think this is the largest number of personnel ads, right, from this?
Well, we're looking at, again, this is not just an arbitrary increase to the budget. We're
No, I'm
looking
not
at
saying
needs
it's
of students
arbitrary.
who have more significant needs and trying to staff for those students.
No, I understand. I want to understand also what the staffing is and how much it's costing, and, just the whole, just understand where the numbers are coming from. And so for the 9.5 paras that we are asking to add,
I'll put together a memo for you
that would be
tomorrow that
great.
will give you the
Perfect.
The proposed, what the budgeted salary, knowing that obviously we have to hire a person.
Right.
So
I know.
that goes up and down based on the
It's so
hire, but
difficult
we'll
because
give
we
you
have
the
so
actual
little
salary
time,
we've
so I
done.
ask now. Normally, it would not be a
I'm
big
happy
deal,
to
but
do it.
tomorrow
It'll
we
be
have to
easier
vote,
for me
so.
to do it if I can have 5 minutes to think about it. than to
Perfect.
Do it
sit
at the
here and
top.
Have those
Sure.
questions fired at me. So I'll get those
Yeah.
to you tomorrow.
And I think, Mr. Llewellyn, we're showing a decrease of 1 in the budget on the Walter Fitzgerald campus, because I think that's the dean,
Yeah, it says dean, but it's listed under teacher, and we don't have the breakout of the actual staff. It's just listed under teacher.
Right, just listed as teachers, so I think that's the
All of our
one.
deans are listed in the teacher line,
Right.
so.
That's
where it is.
That's
Yes,
where it is.
that's where it is.
That's
It's on
why
the
we have, we
they're
did
paid
it
on the
that way,
teacher's scale.
to be clear.
Mrs. Lou McCormick, if you're switching to another subject, I wonder if you can ask the transportation questions, or?
Oh, transportation, yes,
Yes.
yes, thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay, transportation. I have actually a very big picture, and thank you for, is there a transportation person here still? No. Oh, yes, yes. So my question is fairly big picture, which is the requirement that we have from the state to provide busing. I understand we have to provide the availability of busing to every student. However, if students should opt to not take the bus, do we then run empty buses? And are we required to run the empty buses, or do we just have to? Are we just required to have them available should they change their mind?
We don't, we just shift the stops to reduce the ride time for other buses. Any student can opt out. We have I guess the best example, we had parents at Fairfield Prep on their bus 57. There were 58 students assigned to the bus, and the bus would show up on any given day with 5 or 10 kids on it. And the parents couldn't understand why the bus had to go to every stop. And because the statute says what you do for the public school, you have to do for the private school. So they were assigned seats, and they had to go into school at 7 o'clock to be in whatever team they were in. But when they don't have sports, then the parents don't take them, and they ride the bus. So the parents in the school got together, and they sent out a survey, which is an opt-out survey, which we have on our website. We've had it for years, and they can opt out of the transportation. We reduced 13 stops off the run. It involved 15 kids, and it saved 12 minutes on the ride time when it all got done. The difference between Fairfield Prep and the public school is that stops are all over God's creation. So it's, it's hard to tell, but the kids take the bus going home. They just weren't taking it going in. So we're going to change that route to reduce the travel time going in, so the kids don't have to stand outside as long waiting for the buses. As far as with the public school, we have the opt-out form. We have 8, I think, parents in the district that have signed that and opted out of transportation. And we've got a lot of calls, and with the public school, we don't remove stops when they opt out, because most of the time it ends up that there's 5 or 6 kids at the stop. So you're not saving anything but the seat, and the student next to him with the trombone is more than glad to take up that seat. But we do have some, and then we'll shift stops. If 2 buses come near each other, we'll move kids from the bus with 53 kids down to the bus with 30 kids.
And how fluidly can you do that shifting of stops?
And in case people can't hear you, if you could speak more directly into the microphone.
We change routes every Thursday.
Is that so weekly?
Yeah.
Okay, and if a parent should decide to need the bus, let's say for a particular day, and they've opted out, can they just give you a call and say, my child needs to take the bus on a particular day, and let you know to opt back in, or how does that work?
I think that's generally the reason why they don't want to opt out, is because they don't know what the lead time will be. A lot of times, like I said, we don't remove the stop, and the stop is already there. The only thing that takes time is to put a bus stop back in. So if they're going to an existing stop, which might be 4 or 5 houses down the street, they can certainly just call, and then the school will notify the driver
or we'll notify the driver, and the student's back on the following day.
I ask this question because after having been in the various public schools, I see how many parents drive their kids to and from school every day. And I'm sure that almost none of them have opted out of busing, not even knowing that there is an opt-out form. And I think if we actually looked at the percentage of the students that actually are conveyed to and from school, it's not an insignificant number. And I'm wondering if, in fact, if we were able to communicate better with the public and perhaps even create incentives to opt out, that we might be able to run the buses more efficiently based on actual usage versus just assuming that everyone's going to need to and just run them all. So I'm thinking that, I don't know that it'll be able to be done in time for this budget session, but I'd very much like to explore the concept of, at least for next year, to publicize more widely and to think perhaps more creatively about how we can incent those who actually do not take the bus and who drive to school, or who drive their kids to and from school or carpool, to opt out and perhaps realize maybe a parking incentive or something at the high school, because we charge for parking. And at the end of the day, this could actually save busing, fuel, time, I don't know. But I guess we'll never know unless we actually do a study and understand the student behavior more specifically.
Well, I remember the issue came up around the high school parking. It was actually in the operational audit, they suggested that we require the parents to opt out in order to get a place at the high school. That was deemed by our lawyers to be illegal. So I don't know what incentives you can come up with, because what incentive does a parent have to opt out? The goodness of their heart, they may need this to stop at some point. So you'd have to come up with something that would give them a reason to opt out. And we have a lot of parents who drive, but they don't drive every day. Right? They might drive, or they may drive to school and not from school. And they might drive on rainy days and not on sunny days. And it's quite complicated. But right now, we've got 8 parents who opt out of 8,000 we transport. They'd have to all opt out like on the same route, on the same street, to end up, I mean, I don't know. We can look at it, but there's no guarantee that it would result in savings.
No,
And
of course.
I don't know what incentives you have in mind to get parents to opt out. What were you thinking? Like pay them to opt out? I don't know. I mean, I'm serious. When you say incentives, usually you mean you pay people.
Can I?
Let me ask, do you want to dismiss this
I'm just
option
asking
right off,
what
or would you
ideas
like
had
to
about-
explore it?
Right, see, right now, there's no incentive to opt out. That's the problem.
Well, we have no program and no communication to opt out either.
Right.
But-
So
but can
I'm
I,
just curious what ideas
Can I
there might be to
suggest that
do that.
if you have some ideas, but that you acknowledge
Right.
that probably we can't do it for this budget season, and it's something that you may want to explore more directly with Mr. Fickey and
Yeah, I've already
and,
acknowledged that.
See if there's
yeah.
a
Yeah,
We
I've
can-
acknowledged
we can look,
that.
look
That's
into
exactly
it. I'd
what
be
I
interested
said.
in what's worked. And, again, you have to get enough people. If there's 4 kids at the stop and 3 opt out, you're running the bus, you're stopping the bus.
stop.
Um,
But,
Anyway,
so,
I don't know. I don't have a good answer.
can I move to another board member, as I'm trying to
You absolutely
keep
may.
a similar schedule? So we'll start with Mrs. Max
Thank you, Mr.
Pinelli this
Fickey.
time and work back around the horn.
Is he done?
No, so, this is when you'll know whether you're truly loved or not. Any other transportation questions? And then if not, Mr. Fickey can start heading home. Any other transportation questions? Mr. Patton? A quick one, I'm sure.
I would like to just make a personal comment, or not a point of personal privilege, but to thank Mr. Fickey for all the personal attention that I know he gives when my kids had problems on the bus in elementary school. Buses not showing up, buses late all the time. He personally responded, within 24 hours, and the situation was immediately fixed. So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that he does, and I really appreciate, the mess that he has to coordinate every week.
Seeing no other hands go up, thank you very much for staying, Mr. Fickey. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Okay. Sorry, I should have been very smoothly ready. I'm going to wait on that one. Okay, I had one quick question. This is sort of both a legal issue and a staffing issue. Not that I'm looking to increase it, but on page 63, and I don't even think you need to look at the page, with the athletic directors at the high school, but with more mandates coming down from the state in terms of coaching requirements, is that handled internally at the middle schools, or do the athletic directors have any oversight of the middle school coaches?
I don't know. Mr. Coyne, I don't think they do, right? Right. The middle school coaches are handled by the principals, essentially.
Okay, so how would they be kept abreast of any of these? I mean, I know that.
Well, remember a lot of the rules apply to interscholastic athletics, which is 95% of it is at the high school. We do have some at the middle school, right, but that would be the responsibility of the principal or one of his staff to stay on top of it for those coaches. And obviously, if they needed some assistance, they needed someone to come down to a training, we've got people that can do that training. If there's a first aid class, we can bring people together from middle school and high school and do that. They certainly can share resources, but the interscholastic piece is much smaller. They're not part of really, CIAC has got the major rules here.
I'm just thinking of like the concussion rule and all of that. That
Yes.
certainly would be relevant to basketball and.
Well, every sport.
Right.
Every sport potentially.
Well, no, I meant that middle school only has basketball
Right.
and cross and track, so.
Yeah. So, but I think that I mean the more the more requirements that are put on us, the more people get spread thin. That's kind of what's been happening. But Mr. Coyne, why don't you come forward and enlighten us? Because otherwise, there's no microphone back there, and we don't want anybody to miss your wisdom. He couldn't resist that. This is when he said, I thought Greg Hatzis was covering this meeting.
But at the same time, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, if your question has been answered, it doesn't have to be answered further.
Oh, but Dr. Title so wanted Mr. Coyne to come up.
I
so.
do. I've been waiting for 2 nights.
As again, and I'm just looking at an administrative and oversight issue.
The Connecticut
and wondering how that's
Association
being
of
addressed.
Schools and the CIAC, they're related organizations. They send all principals information regarding requirements for athletics. So the middle school principals are kept up to date with any new requirements, just like I am. I'm just lucky enough to have an athletic director to carry them out, but the middle school principals would have the same information.
Okay, thank you. As a side note, and then I do have a couple of pages to look to, again, I'm very intrigued by Mrs. Lou McCormick's idea of the parent volunteers, specifically regarding lunch. The one issue with that is that I'm hearing through PTA Council how much membership is down in terms of PTA. I've heard from every PTA that I've been with that they're increasingly finding it difficult to get parent volunteers for already existing positions. So I agree that it's an interesting idea. I just don't see how in the current environment, I think more parents might be going back to work or in some other way busy. I wish it was something I wish it were something that we could take more advantage of. I don't see how, given the feedback I've been getting regarding getting parent volunteers. But some specific budget issues. One general question, as I see the staffing per school, and obviously that comes with different price tags attached, if staff gets moved from one school to another, the money travels with them. That's not any type of money that's allocated to that school.
That's correct. The money follows the teacher.
Okay. Because obviously it wouldn't be right for any school to be cut short because somebody...
Right. They're not, their allocation does not include their staff.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Then, going back to a couple specific pages, on page 121, no, actually, I'm sorry, that's, Ms. Leonardi has now covered that thoroughly. I'm all set on that one. On page 123, I had a couple of questions. First, regarding tuition line 329, which here is, has an increase of 97,000, but earlier in the book had an increase on page 45 of 80-something. Hold on. Of 88, and I was just wondering what else is being factored into that tuition?
That particular line is just special ed tuition because the other tuition line, 329 up above, under 60, instructional services, that would include tuition to magnet schools and so forth. So that 329 under 62 on page 123,
Right.
that should be just the special ed tuition. Am I correct, Doreen? Yep. So what numbers are you trying to reconcile?
Okay, all right, no, now I see the other, I wasn't even looking at the other numbers. I'd only looked at that last one, so,
Okay.
okay, my mistake. And then I was also wondering about line 303, and I'm sorry if I missed this earlier in the book, but that decrease of 281, is that just something that has been reallocated somewhere else, or what was that, what is that service change?
That's the increased revenue from the excess cost grant being applied towards those services. There's no reduction.
I didn't think so. I figured it was from someplace else.
Right. Now that's a big piece. That includes evaluations as well as consultation. Correct. So that's the combination of the two big accounts, which I think, getting back to the point about the person to do overflow evaluations. Obviously, if we have another person on the district who is capable of doing complicated evaluations and could do them in-house for us, then this line might go down, because that's always been a line that Andrew has had trouble containing, to put it nicely.
Okay. Then on page 124, and again, I apologize if I missed something here, the technology line, so this is on Fund 65, line 503. What is it that's captured by that technology line that's not captured on page 160? Which was the whole 1.4, I believe it was, for technology.
I love this. This is like budget jeopardy. I'll take technology capital for 100. That's pretty much the capital line, so it should match up there. It does. Okay. Yeah, 1,412,429 on page 160. Right? And that's the same number. 1,412,429.
I don't want to tell you what number I was looking at. I apologize for that.
Right. So that's the tech
Yep.
capital.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's my mistake.
Yeah.
I apologize. And
I love it. This is like a mental flossing. You know?
Go ahead.
I think that
I'm getting
might be-
giddy.
I
Get
believe
up at
that's it for
4:30
me
is
right
what
now.
happens.
Thank you.
Mr. Fattabine?
I'd like to go back to page, if I may, 78, where you have the health service account, or health insurance account.
78?
Page 78.
Yes.
Account 201, health insurance.
Yes.
You have the third or fourth item down there, insurance retirees. Last year, we budgeted, or was budgeted 1.153 million. And I guess my understanding was, or is, that the retirees pay into the district for their insurance premiums, or portion, or at least all of it, as I understand it. The question is, when you go back to the income or revenue on 27, I couldn't identify what line item is that corresponding revenue. Am I missing something, or is there a corresponding revenue in the budget
For retirees?
for retirees?
Their revenue is factored into the profit and loss statement and is netted to arrive at this figure. So if you go back to the profit and loss statement, let's just look at the most recent one. Somewhere. Not that.
You're talking
I
about the
got it.
medical retention fund?
Yes, this. Medical retention from profit and loss statement.
Right.
There's a line called other income revenue.
Right.
Right, it's like 8,600,000 and something thousand
They
dollars.
pay an awful
right?
lot, huh?
What's that?
They pay an awful lot.
Well, that includes retiree payments.
Right.
Okay,
That's a composite.
It's a composite of all of those things that
Right.
are listed. Now, when Doreen calculates it, she actually does an estimate. There's a lot of different pieces that go into that, but that's where the retiree payments go in, and that's netted off the total expenses to get us the net that has to go into the budget. So
Well,
that's the line what's included.
my question, though, is in the budget book. I would assume you have expenses, which are their budgeted items, and you have in the budget book revenue. And that revenue offsets some of the budget expenses. So I guess as a total budget, we in essence are appropriating our expenses less our revenue, or requesting an appropriation for our expenses less our revenue. So I guess I don't maybe quite understand. I would think that income from that retirement, retired individuals paying into the fund would show up somewhere on this revenue side of the budget book. I understand that, because if you look, but you're saying it's not in there. Is it on the?
But it's an
or
aggregate
I don't know
number.
where it is. Pardon me?
It's in there, but it's an aggregate number? Is that
Well,
what?
that's why I'm curious. In other words, you have a listing of all the revenue sources which.
So what you're saying is you want to see the revenue for the medical retention fund listed as like revenue to the Board of Education under, say, other sources. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Well, if we're expensing it on our expense side,
Right, I understand.
see the corresponding income side. I would think that's the way I would look at it. Now, you're saying it's in a composite number on a separate statement on the medical retention fund, but I guess if you look at the separate statement from medical retention fund, the Board of Ed operating budgeted number is in our budget book.
Right, well, this is also in the budget book.
Right. But I don't have I have a composite number, but it's, from that composite number, I don't know of a way in which you could determine the income from those retirees and compare it, in essence, to the expense that is listed in the budget.
Mr. Fadimine, may I? The reason I asked for the balance sheet for Fund 63 and 4, this is the only way you will get what that revenue is, because it's not in the book. So if you look at the Fund 64 retirees, these three, not the 1/6 that I went over before, that's the revenue from them that goes into that composite number. It's not in the book where you can see it. At least I haven't found it. Forgive me if I'm wrong.
It's not in the revenue portion of the book.
Doreen?
We don't really consider it revenue because it's not a source of revenue to the Board of Ed. It's really a pass-through. We're just taking money from the retirees and passing it through and paying the insurance company.
Well, that's why we have an expense budget of, previously of 1.15. That's what we paid to the insurance companies.
No, that's one of the reasons why I combined it, because it's not necessarily representative of the amount that's attributable to just the retirees. That's
But there is an amount attributed to the retirees that can be determined.
right, but it's
That may
paid.
not be it.
But it's technically paid by the retirees. They pay 100% of the premium. We're just funding some.
100% of premium?
Right.
Yes.
Not their cost, but the premium.
Correct.
Sorry.
Right.
Yep.
The rate.
Okay.
Yep.
The rate, not the premium.
Rate.
There is no premium.
The allocation rate.
Yeah, the
Right.
allocation rate.
Not the cost.
It's
Right.
a premium allocation
Right.
rate. I think we're saying the
Sometimes
same
it's
thing.
higher than the cost, and sometimes it's lower.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe.
So, Mr. Fadimine, do you want to move on, or do you want to further
Well,
explore, or what do
So
you
the
wish?
answer is it's not in our revenue side portion of the budget,
Because it's a pass-through.
Right.
but it is in our expense.
It's in the budget book in total, included in this document. It's not broken out.
Okay. That's it.
Mr. Convertito.
Couple of questions. Pages 82 to 83, the detail on the security and electricity and fuel and so forth. When I look at the calculations from 14-15 to 15-16, the differential goes anywhere from 34% per annum, plus 20% per annum, just on the heating fuel. Why is there such a differential between facilities? Rather than, my assumption is we bid out the number, we knew what we used last year for gallons. Why are some of these at 0.35, plus 0.35, and some are at +2, and some are at or 1.5 times what they were the previous year.
Anybody want to tackle this one? Nobody wants to talk about how it's calculated. I will say one thing, that if we're adding or subtracting square footage, that goes into the equation as well. And also, if we are replacing boilers, we assume a certain energy savings, which might account for it in certain buildings. But it may be the actual usage versus the budgeted usage. It was adjusted. But I think if you look pretty much at heating fuel down the line, just run down, you know, the elementary schools, you could see it's a pretty healthy bump in every, you know, in every spot. Heating fuel being the, you know, one of the biggest parts of it. But we have, for example, at Osborne Hill, there's an aberration in electricity because we've been paying a lot for electricity due to the portable gym, which is completely run by electricity. It's very expensive. And so that, with any luck, will certainly be offline by the time this budget starts. So I think that would explain
Is the
the decrease there.
in Riverfield due to the construction? on
Yeah,
electricity?
yes. Because we'll be adding square footage at Riverfield, and so that would explain why that would go up. There was a factor added to certain buildings, like Fairfield Ludlow High School will be adding square footage. So you're going to see a little bit of an increase there. And then in some places, if we took it out of North Stratfield, hopefully we didn't take it out of Jennings. Doesn't look,
If you could just
yeah.
offline send to us how,
So that's,
how
yeah.
you do that calculation.
There's massive spreadsheets behind this.
I'm just curious on the methodology of it. You
So-
don't have to answer that now. It's sort of offhand.
We've got it, but that, yeah, I think that's a
but
big piece.
I'd just
is
like
the-
to understand the methodology and how we're estimating that number.
Do you need that for tomorrow night, or just in general you need it? You'd like to see it?
In general.
Okay.
We have it.
It hasn't been off the mark in the 3 years I've been here, so I assume it's, you know, I'm just curious in the methodology. And I guess through the chair, I guess to Andrea or Dave. On the new special ed positions that you've created, will any of those affect the excess cost share or be included in that calculation?
I'll let Andrea handle that one.
The state really doesn't allow us to use excess cost, use administrative salaries in the excess cost provision. However, where I think these positions, if done,
There's no overhead calculation in excess cost share?
there's not for administrators. We can use everything else, teachers, salaries, benefits, paras, OT, transfer, everything else. The spreadsheet is a mile long, but administrative calculation, because, you know, frankly, we'd have to divide it by, you can see our staff, our administrator to student ratio. It's not going to result in a tremendous amount of our salary being assigned to one child, and it's hard to calculate how much of our time is spent on one child versus overall program review and the whatnot.
So they don't let you allocate a portion of an administrator to a student, even if an administrator spends a lot of time on it. Doreen,
Correct.
did you?
It has to be
Direct
direct
service.
service to kids,
So
and they don't.
So the one at the Fitzgerald campus, would that be considered direct service to kids?
No, because that person would be there anyway to service other.
Okay, just
The building principals, for example, we can't allocate a portion of their salary to the students with significant special needs
Okay.
who attend their school.
When you discussed it early, you talked about earlier intervention, and is there any assumption for any mitigated costs by adding these positions?
There really can't be in year one, because we have to build we have to build the service. But I foresee if we do this well and we start to, rather than being crisis managers, we start to do what we could do 10 years ago when we had 200 or 300 fewer students and fewer complex kids, is we spent a lot more time in with teams earlier. And right now, the four of us spend almost no time in with complex kids teams or with groups of teachers, because we are constantly putting out fires. That's what we do. And and I think what you've seen, the more our work has been focused on putting out fires, you see corresponding increases in things like the need for outside consulting services, the need for increased legal fees, the need for evaluations that may not really lend themselves to program design because we're not getting to the teams soon enough because we're just putting out fires. And
Okay.
I understand
Okay.
that we're looking
Okay.
at stable enrollment.
Assuming you get these positions, how will you track that?
Well, I think what you'll see is
A cost
couple of
benefit,
things.
on a cost benefit basis.
I think what we'll see is we'll be able to provide better quality services. We'll see over time, again, probably not in year one, but over time, a reduction in reliance on legal fees because we're with teams earlier. If we get the right people in the right jobs, we're going to see improving relationships with families who have kids with complex needs. I mean, I think we do a pretty good job, but we could do so much more to assist these families and kids earlier if we just had more time to do that. So I think what we'll be able to see are decreasing needs to rely on these outside resources and improving relationships with the families of kids with complex needs, doing program design much earlier, lowering their stress levels, lowering their need for these outside people to help manage the process.
Okay.
Before you go off of that subject, Mr. Patton, did you want to follow up on that? And
Yeah,
he does?
just a quick question, and I don't know if you can answer this off the top of your head, so you can just email me the answer if you don't have it now. Does the, following what Mr. Convertito is saying on the excess cost share, I know the Walter Fitzgerald campus dean to administrator bump up is kind of, stuck in this grouping to make it all work. Does that, since we would get a partial reimbursement from the state for excess cost share for a dean/teacher, but we can't for an administrator, does that affect the dollars from the excess cost share grant in any way or a tiny bit? Nothing.
None of
significant?
the students currently attending the Walter Fitzgerald campus qualify into the excess cost provision. None of them have a per pupil expenditure that exceeds 4.5 times the district.
So that would be
It will have zero impact on the excess
That's all I
cost
wanted
share.
to know.
Thank you.
Those
Back-
aren't the kids who are in excess cost.
Thank you. Back to Mr. Convertito.
Yeah, I'm good. I just have a couple of follow-up questions, but I'll get to you offline.
Mrs. Gerber. Yeah, let me, I'm trying to get to the end and then go to public comment. Can I see hands of how many public comment people we may have in the audience? Don't all raise your hands at once. We have one, okay. I'll say that if you need to get home, we can interrupt and have public comment, or if not, we'll finish with the last four board members and then go to public comment. Oh, 5, yes.
Leave me out.
I think this is actually also for Mrs. Leonardi about the community partnership program. I just was hoping you'd be able to provide some information about that. So just
The community partnership program has been in existence. What we decided to do in order to really be transparent about what our high school, within those 4 years of high school and another 3 years for some kids, is to separate it out. So what you see here, these are not new positions. These are just broken away from the high school where they were housed last year. The only addition would be, there is no addition, but the only help they would get would be the addition, the increased time with the secondary coordinator if we had the Walter Fitzgerald side.
Got it.
But it's no new staff otherwise.
right, yeah, no, I figured it was somewhere else, but I just wanted to get some clarity because I know that
The
I think a
program
question had
serves
come
our
about
kids
that.
with significant disabilities transitioning from school to life, from 18 to 21.
18 to 21, right? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then I had another question. This is, it was really more just out of curiosity. It's not a large amount of money. Page 104, 105, 106, the number 415, the other supplies, materials. I just see each school has quite a small fund for the materials for nurses. I was just curious about that because I wasn't sure how that worked because I know that the nurses themselves are, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was you too.
Sorry. That's Andrea.
Because I know that the nurses are employed by the Board of Health, and I just wasn't sure how it worked with their supplies. I know it's relatively small, and I see, but it's different per school, and there's actually a fairly, especially in elementary, I think the lowest is 250 and the highest is 712, and it didn't seem to necessarily correlate to enrollment, so I just was curious about that.
You're going to see differences based in, again, some of our kids with more complex needs. These are things like rubber gloves and Band-Aids and bandages and, you know, the little plastic things that slip over the thermometer. I don't know all the medical terms for them. But if you have a school that has a higher population of kids with significant needs, then you need more rubber gloves.
Got it.
The ECC, they go
Yeah, I
through
see
rubber
they have a
gloves
big
like,
number.
you know, probably 20 pair a day,
Okay.
each teacher and
Right.
para. So those are the kinds of things. Also, you have in higher schools with higher incidence of food allergies or high-end medical needs, you might see increases in things like the protein-soluble wipes and those kinds of things. And that would go through the nursing budget, not through the Board of Health, but through us.
Okay, great, thank you. And I also just, this is not you, you're done, sorry.
May I follow up on that?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Oops, I'm sorry.
So we have a follow-up question.
Just very quickly, because I have been asked this several times and I've never been able to produce a number, and I still don't think that you could. This equipment, in terms of breaking it out by cost, since we are talking about hopefully approving a policy which will increase the number of hand wipes, the protein-soluble wipes needed, that is already factored into this, so that that's not going to be a burden then on principals that they'll have to pull from something else, or it is not.
It's really not factored in because we have no way to mathematically calculate, but we would have to pull from other sources. I don't think it's going to be hugely impactful financially.
Because they're already buying them.
I think it's doable.
Right.
Most schools, especially at the elementary, are already buying them. So I don't think it's going to, it should impact our decision-making on the food allergy policy. But I do think we'll have to pull from other places in the normal course of budgeting should we make any decisions like the protein-soluble wipes or those kinds of issues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'm definitely done. I guess one other thing I just wanted to clarify is my questions about Holland Hill with the numbers there had nothing to do with redistricting. It was really more simply a matter of clarifying that this is a school that is over capacity. Their enrollment has increased. Having had children at a very overcrowded elementary school for many, many years, I'm sensitive to that. And I'm not quite sure what 3 schools have over 100 seats per school, but I certainly am not advocating for any kind of redistricting. I just want to make sure that the Holland Hill students are able to have a good learning environment.
Thank you. Ms. Carnell.
I just want to ask a question because I think you had brought it up last time. Isn't every school districted for a 504?
No.
I thought that's what we were trying to get our schools to.
They're not all sized for a 504. The initial school facilities plan, the most recent school facilities plan, has Holland Hill and Mill Hill both being sized up to a 504. Board members raised some good questions about whether that's really necessary, and when we come back and review that long-range facilities plan again, we're shooting for the February board meeting to do that, we'll have some options in there about sizing those down and perhaps shaving some costs off those projects. So, Dwight isn't anywhere close to a 504.
That's why I didn't
never
understand.
will be. And
Right.
Right. Yeah.
You use the word redistricting, but we're not going to do that. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, thank you.
Have at it.
I plead the fifth. On page 42, in reference to 325, it says personnel recruitment expenses. Maybe you can just go into a little of that, and you make reference to a recruitment team to conduct on-site visits to check credentials. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let Ann take that. That's her account, and
So this account is used for exactly what it says on here. First of all, we do have an online program that we use called AppleTrack, which is tracking our applications by vacancy, by position desired, those kinds of things. So that's in there.
We had to advertise an HVAC position, a very specific position that requires a certain licensing. So we had to go through different organizations to advertise that. So that gives us an account to be able to pull from that. In the event of hiring an administrator, there are times that we bring a team of folks to a different district to conduct final interviews there or do a site visit, those kinds of things. So a lot of stuff all lumped in here for that account for different reasons.
Okay, thanks.
Okay? Thanks.
Okay, going back to some of the information that I requested, I was asking for, and maybe my question wasn't clear, but I was asking for an in-depth breakdown of each school of where there is open teaching positions and, what are we doing about those? That was part of the question.
Well, based on the timing and quantity of questions that came in,
It was impossible.
we did our best to get as much information as possible. As you can see, there was a lot of stuff. And some questions came in after the close of business on Friday, and we had to turn things around on Monday because we knew Tuesday was going to be a lost day. And we're also sensitive in some cases to some disclosing of individual school situations. The documents don't exist. Someone may be able to figure out who it is if we are too specific about it. So, but some of the requests were just so onerous to do. In the short time we had to turn it around, we just weren't able to do it. And we did a lot, but if the information wasn't available in the time frame we were given to do it in, then we just, we had the entire staff work the entire time from the last board meeting until Monday, doing almost nothing but working on these requests. And I hope people found them helpful, but if you didn't get an answer to every question that you asked, it's just because we ran out of time, or it was just so burdensome to find it that we just couldn't do it.
No, we're all on a tight time frame, even for us to review the budget. But I would have
This
to.
budget has been in your hands since a week ago last Tuesday. Right?
Let her ask a question.
It's a week.
A week. Some of us work for a living.
Okay, that's the nature of the beast, and we do everything we could do to get all the information.
You have a question you want to pose?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
We're having a
The more lead time, the better.
Actually read it, analyze, and submit questions. I think we did it promptly.
I guess my question is, and maybe you can't break it down by school because of confidentiality.
That was a concern.
Yeah, no, I get that. How many open positions are there within the 17 schools that are in the district? And when I say open, I mean teacher positions. I don't mean other sort of positions.
Ann, come on up.
Don, I'm not sure what you mean by open positions. We have a vacancy in a library media specialist position, a part-time position. Other than that, our positions are fully staffed. We have folks who are out on medical leave for various reasons, so I don't consider those to be open positions. We're filling with long-term subs. Somebody's out having a baby, they're out, they have a long-term sub. So that's not a vacancy.
Okay, maybe
That
I'm not
make
asking.
sense?
Yes, maybe I'm not asking the question correctly. Not medical and things like that, and hopefully those people return. So in the 17 schools, we're not looking to hire any teachers. Maybe I'm not sure I'm asking.
Now in the end of the school year, or
the budget year going forward to what we know?
I'm not anticipating any new positions. There are no new positions in the budget from now to the end of the year. Again, we have folks out who we have a long-term sub filling for.
Okay. Okay, for example, and I could be wrong, I thought like we were still looking for another physics teacher. That's what I was talking about. But maybe you're looking at that, we have a long-term sub in there, so maybe that's
That
where I'm not
physics position is not an open position at this time.
So we're not looking for another.
It's not an open position at this time. We have a substitute in there.
Okay, so
That's. I really can't say much more about that position.
okay, I think that helps me clear it a
Okay.
little. Let me ask it this, because I think there's, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's daily substitute and then there's permanent substitutes?
In our buildings, we have interns that fill positions for us. We can't always get our positions filled through interns just because of availability with the local universities. And so in some cases, we hire permanent building subs who are paid an $86 a day rate and who are there every day and fill in for different classes. Those folks, we look for certification, so we look for them to be certified teachers. And then we have subs who fill in on a daily rate, just somebody calls in sick and we need a substitute.
Right.
We start with the building subs and interns, and if we need more than that, then we go beyond to a daily sub to come in there.
Okay, I think that helped clarify some of this. When you say an intern, could you just explain what that means?
An intern is someone who is finishing up their certification requirements at local universities. They're graduate students. And so they are, again, as I said, fulfilling their last year of certification requirements, and intern in schools around the region. We're not the only district that does that. We have a lot of competition, which is why sometimes we can't always get all the positions filled that we want to.
Right, and only 2 sort of local universities.
Oh, there's more than that, but yes.
But I meant
yeah.
right in our immediate. So these interns would be in a classroom by themselves without any other teachers?
Correct. They act as substitutes for us. They are folks who are there. They're supervised with other teachers, like we have a building sub coming in, a daily sub coming in. Those are people who would check with their colleagues. If they're coming into 3rd grade, check with the other 2 3rd grade colleagues, perhaps get some specific information on what's going on in the class. Teachers leave plans, those kinds of things. So the interns fill in as a daily sub.
Okay. Thank you, that's helpful. I think I may be able to formulate my question now. And if not, we've got an English teacher on the other side. In terms of permanent substitutes, and there's people in these permanent teaching positions, how many are those? Maybe
Well,
that's a better way to ask the
yeah,
question.
what I said was we have 20, I think the number was 27, right?
Right.
We have 27 positions where someone is on a leave of absence. That's a longer-term leave of absence.
Okay.
And those are the positions that are being filled by what we call a long-term sub.
Okay. And those are permanent. I think we went through this once before,
Well-
where they're in the classroom on a daily
Right,
basis.
right. They're
That's
not
what I mean by
permanent necessarily for the rest of the year.
Right,
Right.
Or hopefully as long as they need to be there,
Correct.
correct? Okay. Thank you. That helped clarify that. I think there was... I'm going to save it for maybe tomorrow night.
Okay. Mr. Patton, what? Mr. Patton, a follow-up by Mr. Patton, a follow-up by Mr. Confortito? Please do.
absolutely.
Yes, please do.
Do I have a follow-up?
Please do.
Just one quick follow-up. On the per diem per day for substitutes, when's the last time that we adjusted that figure?
It's been a long time, but we've done a survey of area districts. We're really not out of line with area districts. There are not a lot of districts that pay more of a daily sub rate, and there's also studies out there that show that increasing the rate really doesn't help a whole lot in getting more subs there. We're facing an economy right now where there just aren't a lot of people around. They're getting jobs. We have teachers that are certified folks who have acted as subs for us, and they're dropping like flies, taking positions elsewhere that we're scrambling to find subs. And it's not something unique to our district. It is something that we're seeing nationwide.
So our per diem is not preventing us from getting quality substitutes?
I don't believe it is. No, we looked into that because it was one area that we really felt we had to take a look at.
Thank you.
Mr. Patton.
No, I have no further questions. I'll say that I was going to make a comment. I'll save it for tomorrow night.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Lou McCormick?
So I want to say thank you for responding to, I had 6 different topics that I had questions regarding, and I appreciate the answers that you did provide. I have to say, given the amount of time, I can see it being a challenge to respond. It was difficult actually providing you with the questions on a timely basis. But I will note, if I can just direct everybody to the calendar in the front of this, that this budget process did start in November. And I understood, from the very generous time that Mr. Flynn and Mr. Tetro offered here, that they were part of the process since the fall. And I would just offer and suggest that perhaps to avoid this time crunch in the future, that the Board of Ed members can be involved as part of the process earlier on, so that a lot of our questions can be avoided or detailed out during the discussion, which again links back to some of the bylaw suggestions we had where the Board of Ed members become more involved during the process of the budget formulation, so this isn't a blind inquiry for 2 days on a crash course, which I think is not necessarily as productive as it would be if we were deeply familiar with what all the numbers within the book are. However, given the process is what it is, and we all seem to be living by it and don't seem as a group to have much issue with it, I will go back to the process and the questions that I have. One being the pre-K program. I have followed this closely. I am often torn on the concept of pre-K. I think it's wonderful to have pre-K. On the other hand, I also don't think it's necessarily the end-all be-all as many people portray it to be. But I will ask, given that it was prefaced on the racial imbalance that we had at McKinley, that upon reading the information that you provided, it appears that it has not solved the racial imbalance issue at McKinley as it was originally proposed to be the solution for. Is that correct? And do we expect it to change?
Well, it actually did. Depends on the year. We're so close to the line. We've bounced around under and over it for several years. And a couple years ago, we actually got under the 25% differential, which is the magic number. Then last year, we ticked back up like a percentage point above. And so it's very few kids are involved in being on or over that magic number. And so there's a lot of factors that go into it. The issue is...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Where are we this year? I didn't see the number.
We don't know because the state will give us a number. I think the last one came in May last year. If you look at the letter that I included in that packet, they calculate it. We can't calculate it. The state has to do it. And sometimes we try to make estimates, but we just don't know. We're probably going to be within a point or two either way, as we are all the time. And the problem we have, because I've been wrestling with this one since I've been here, is that this is probably the least expensive, most educationally advantageous way to do it if it can keep us in compliance. Because realistically, the only other way to do this would be to redistrict. There's really, I've looked at this thing 20 different ways. I've looked at what other districts have tried to do. There used to be a racial imbalance task force here. We brought technical assistance down from the state. We've seen what other districts have tried to do with it. And basically, the only solution that has worked in any other district is to redistrict. So at this point, we have a commitment to the state, at least for, into the foreseeable future, or at least for another year, to carry on with this model. Now, in May, because one of your questions was how often do they monitor it, I think was your question. They monitor it every year.
Yeah.
And so what could happen is, let's say it comes back and we're, say, 4 percentage points out of compliance. They might write a letter, instead of saying carry on, they might say the Board of Ed has to submit a new plan. Come up with a new idea. Come up with something that prove to us that will actually work, in which case, then the issue's on the table. But I will tell you that there's no issue, there's no other way to do it that is going to cost you less money than the way we're doing it, and there's no other way to do it, in my view, that is less disruptive than this.
Can I ask you, how many students does it take to solve the racial imbalance issue?
Well, you need to move enough kids, and by the way, getting under the 25% difference, and just the 25% refers to, it's an absolute imbalance between the percentage of non-white students at McKinley versus the percentage of non-white students in the whole district at that same grade span. So, for example, if we have 15% non-white students K to 5, then McKinley can be up to 40% non-white, and we'd still be in compliance. However, if you're 20 points away, you're still in pending racial imbalance. So if you're going to do a dramatic move, such as look at redistricting, you'd want to look at getting yourself comfortably under the 20, because you don't want to do just a little thing just to get under 25, and then a couple families move and you're back over the top. So
Well, so I'm going to ask again, so how many,
you'd have to,
how many
you'd have to
students?
move. You'd have to move. And remember, what you really need to do is you need to move non-white students from McKinley elsewhere, and/or in combination, move white students to McKinley in some combination, so you can work on both the numerator
So,
and
so
the
at this point,
denominator.
how many students would we need to move to Dwight or Burr in a given year in order to resolve the issue? Is it 1, 2,
No, it's
10?
probably between 5 and 10 to get you under 25%, and then it's going to be 50 to 75 to get you under the 20%.
So 5 to 10 is really what we're looking for.
Right. And that's why some years it's worked, because it all depends on, this whole thing hinges on non-white students who reside in the McKinley district opting to stay at Burr or Dwight for kindergarten and through the rest. That's what has to happen. That's basically the
No,
magic
I understand,
number.
but so my question always comes back to, we are spending, I don't know, in the realm of $350,000+
That's the gross. I think that.
Yes, correct.
The,
to run these pre-K programs with the intention of resolving the McKinley issue, which really surrounds 5 to 10 students that we're looking to move in any given
That would
year.
be the minimum to get yourself.
Correct.
Right, into compliance, which.
Which may or
program
may not
has
happen.
done. Right, in any given year, because the other thing that can happen is.
But we still spend the $350,000, $400,000 every year.
Well, minus the tuition, right? That 350 was the gross, wasn't it?
No, that was in that transportation offset by pre-K tuition. Well, I don't know what that, maybe I'm not clear on what the notation means. That's what it says.
But yeah, it's right. There's costs associated with this. There's no question.
The
program at Burr's been there for
So again,
a while.
so
Dwight
just-
was the new one.
If I can, so at the end of the day, I ask this question not because I don't believe in pre-K. I just believe that there are many alternatives within this area for pre-K that already exist. And I have to say, I mean, most students in the area do go to pre-K, and I believe that the reason we have lower enrollment than we would want is because people go to the pre-K that's in their area. They just typically do. And it's actually a big move to go to a pre-K that's not in your area. The parents have to be doing that for a very particular reason. Perhaps they want to matriculate into Dwight, or they want to matriculate into Burr, or maybe they just thought it was a neat idea. But in any ways, it's not as if there are droves of kids from McKinley coming over to do this pre-K program. I don't really understand why. I don't really understand the rationale, but it probably runs deeper than just the money. In which case, I have to question, we don't offer it to everybody, right? We do offer it to everybody, but there's a limited number of spaces that are available. And we would prioritize students from McKinley for that purpose if there were that many available. And in fact, I'm just wondering, in the forecast, are we expecting there to be more tuition pay students in our future, or are we expecting it to be more McKinley?
Well, first of all, it's sort of impossible to project, but when we put the budget together, we look at a mix. We're trying to have a mixed group of about 1/3 free, 1/3 half, and 1/3 full pay. It doesn't always work out that way. It's worked out to be more full pay this year. But just because a student's from McKinley doesn't mean they're not paying. I mean, not everybody in McKinley is non-white, and not everybody in McKinley is on reduced or free. So it's impossible to project that just for that particular area, right?
Well, I'm concerned mostly,
Right.
I guess, pay or not pay McKinley.
Right. Well, you don't know year to year who applies.
Well, is there a trend? I mean, are you getting out? A lot of times when something takes hold, you get a wait list. So many people have called that they want to be on that wait list, and you can see if it is taking off or if it's not. It's generally, a word of mouth thing, and once one person goes, other people will come.
When Burr was the only program, we had more people who wanted to get in it than we had slots for. And that was one of the reasons why we opened the Dwight program up as well, because we felt like there were some families that wanted to take advantage of it that weren't there. But I think that in general, we've been able to fill most of the slots. We've sort of hold some of the reduced tuition and the no tuition seeing whether those slots will get filled, and when they don't, then we fill them with full tuition. So there seems to be quite a bit of interest in the full tuition slots, and that may or may not help your racial imbalance. So,
Right, because when I
whole
look at
thing
your
is a
numbers,
bit-
it looks like there's
it's a
only
bit-
1 or 2 students that remain at each of these schools at
it
the end of the
varies
day.
from year to year. Some years you get 4 or 5 that stay.
But
It-
can I interrupt
in
you?
either
Nothing-
case,
but
it's not
there's
it's
nothing
not
you
in
can do about it
droves.
right now.
Well, I want to throw that out there because we are kind of throwing money at this. We're chasing. It's a lot of money. It's not
So
insignificant.
some people have taken advantage of this already.
I know
by
they
moving
have.
their kids to another school that they want to go to, and now if you stop the program, no one else can take advantage of that? Is that fair?
No, and I also believe that at the end of the day, the ability to elect to go to another school, that is a separate issue that we could resolve as a separate issue. If people want to redistrict themselves, that is a policy that we ourselves could institute and allow highly populated schools to students to redistrict to low populated schools, and that helps resolve several issues all at once if we wanted to institute a policy as such as that. However, that goes beyond the scope of what I'm asking today, and I will pull it back to pre-K.
And the pre-K conversation, that is not a decision we could make in conjunction with this budget vote, because we'd first have to get permission from the state to change that program, because if we change the program, we'll no longer be complying with what we've promised the state we're going to do. So that would, for instance, this coming May, if we get a letter from the state saying, we'd like another plan from you, that would be the time to say, let's look at this from a whole different perspective, like what you're talking about.
No, absolutely. And so then I'll just go back. If we have to review the program itself, I would also say, let's think about the transportation. It's about $150,000. And all these students are going to eventually come into our public system anyways. And I would imagine that we have so many different programs that would need bolstering. I think that that's a consideration. But anyways, I just throw that out there. And let me move on to the next item. Okay, in transportation, I had asked a question about how many secretarial FTEs support the school dismissal process across the district. I believe the response was, actually, I didn't see a response. So I'm not sure if we didn't have the answer or if just because it was a one-liner, it was omitted. I'll ask the question again to see if, in fact, we do know or have an estimate on the FTEs that support the school dismissal process.
We answered that.
Oh, where is it? I'm sorry, I don't see it on this. Page 8.
We wrote narrative answers to some of these. We didn't
It
just do
says,
attachments.
please see links on ELM bus runs.
It says, school secretaries support dismissal as part of their jobs. It is impossible to assign an FTE to this one function.
That's right. Okay, so you said you couldn't break out the FTEs. Right, that's what I recall. But I will let you know that the reason I asked this question is because in speaking to another district, one of our neighboring districts, they actually have implemented last year as part of their budget season this amazing dismissal app, where all of the parents basically use this app that you type it in, and it basically instructs the school on how the child will be dismissed. And what it did was it ended up saving them a half FTE at every single elementary school they had, which added up to be a couple of $1 million for them. And to them, it was a stroke of genius. It works amazing. The parents love it. I will throw that out to you because it's an interesting idea. It came highly recommended and something that's already been tested in another district.
You'll forward that along.
Absolutely.
Specific information.
What district was that?
It was Westport.
Oh, because they have a lot, like half the number of elementary schools we have, though. So that might factor into it.
What
do you mean?
You'll forward along.
No.
the
This
information.
was the savings at each elementary school.
Yeah, but you'll forward along the information. so-
Absolutely. I'll forward on to you the app that came highly recommended. And I thought that was a very, it's a use of technology to increase efficiency. Let's see. The other question that I had, and maybe this is answered in here also, or it said that it's not possible, maybe I missed that, is regarding my question regarding the iReady results and when and how much cost it might be to make those results available online for parents to view.
That was answered.
Oh, sorry, what was that? I saw the
on page 8.
rubric. Oh, I'm looking at it right now. So where does it say
Bold.
that? There is no budget impact. This is the rubrics I'm reading.
There's no budget impact is the answer.
That's for the progress report rubrics. Oh, it doesn't say iReady.
Underneath it says iReady.
Where? Samples of progress rubrics K through. Okay. Well, if you're telling me that there is no budget impact,
Correct.
then I'm guessing, so you provided me with the timing on the rubric as March, that was what you were planning on providing. Is that also for iReady? Oh, in the fall. Is that no. The rubrics are going to be in the fall. iReady reports, is that including iReady? I guess I'm confused by your response because it keeps going back to rubric, and the iReady report isn't a rubric. So I guess what is the timing for
It's
the
nothing to do
iReady?
with the budget, but do you want Mike to answer the question anyways?
Sure, that'd be great.
Is that your last question, so that we can, fact question, if you will, so that we can then move on to Mr. Llewellyn? Just so I get a sense of timing, because we do have
I think I just
the public,
have,
and then,
I just have one more.
thank you. Mr. Rafferty.
So the rubrics, I met with the curriculum leaders, and we agreed that we'll do better communication for the next reporting period. That will have no budgetary impact.
Okay, good.
For the iReady rubrics, one of the things we're waiting for is the assessment across the year to better formulate what a district report would look like. In the meantime, schools already share iReady reports at conferences. In terms of sharing a district report, one that we want to put online or do disseminate farther and wider, we really need to go through a full cycle to double-check the metrics of what's appropriate progress for our kids.
I just think the individual reports, while they may be shared at some conferences, they're really not broadly disseminated at this point on a quarter by quarter, because they're given in the fall, the winter, and the spring, right? So I don't know if they're only shared once. I mean, I don't know, but the communication would be, I think, very helpful.
We're interested in doing communication. We just want to do it right. So we
No,
want to
I
make sure we
agree.
have a whole year's worth of data before we start disseminating reports.
So different viewpoints, but back to the budget questions?
Yes. Well, you said
One of
no
the things that's-
budgetary impact, correct?
You know, one of the problems is that the canned reports that iReady spits out are very unuser-friendly. And we just can't really use them in their current form, and they're really working hard to come up with a way that would be very easily understood by everybody, and even if we have to write something to accompany it. But the stuff it spits out, I mean, it will be so confusing to people, it would do more harm than good. So
Well, do you have a
that's part of
parent
the
committee
problem.
put together to help decide what's readable and what's not readable? Because that would be probably helpful if you think it's going to be confusing
That
for
would
the
be part of
parents.
the process,
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Rafferty says.
Okay, so for my last question, kind of completely separate, as you know, last year I was very emphatic about world language music and restoring the gifted testing. We've covered world language. Music, I will probably relife again at a future conversation, though we don't need to relive it now because we relived it extensively last year. I will make comment, though, on the gifted in that I believe we have a state requirement to identify. And when I look at the numbers, I believe we have reduced the testing from twice a year to one time a year. And it's hard for me to tell whether that's truly impacted our identification. We also mentioned that we have identified students to be part of the gifted program upon review, a handful of over 3 grades. I don't know if that does it justice, but I do know that if we rely most heavily on the testing, that reducing it to one period, then that one period becomes very important. And when that period occurs also becomes very important. And I understand this last year we did it in the beginning of 3rd grade, which I think is very, given I understand how the tests are offered and work, if I understand them correctly, the bridge between 2nd and 3rd grade becomes complex. And I understand that there would be a budgetary impact to move the 3rd grade testing to the spring of 2nd grade instead of the fall of 3rd grade. However, I have to say that I think that perhaps that might be meaningful. Or alternatively, if we really want to keep it in 3rd grade, then perhaps we test again in 4th grade. Because I'm concerned that since we do have a requirement to at least identify, if not extend services, that at least we should do that and do that very well. And I think we do it well. I think we did it better before because we had more opportunities to identify, and it concerns me that we keep reducing it because we do have an obligation, because even if the district doesn't want to extend extensive offerings and programs, which, there's limited funds. However, there are opportunities for the students to go outside to meet their needs if they're not offered necessarily within the classroom every day. And I think it's necessary for us to consider that. So when I look at these numbers, I look at the 5th grade numbers, and I just want to understand. The 5th grade class that had 7% identified, were they offered 2 years of testing or just 1? The reason I ask is because I know that the 4th grade tested in 2nd and 3rd grade, and I know that the 6th grade tested in 3rd and 4th grade, because that was the year or the period of time when we switched from 3rd and 5th grade to 2nd and 4th grade. And so I want to say that that 5th grade group actually only got tested once, while the 4th grade group got tested twice, just because of the change in the years. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the percentages, the 4th grade is 11%, the 5th grade is 7%, and then the 6th and 7th grade each are 13%. So that to me tells me that the number of times that you actually take the exam offers an opportunity for more students to be identified. Additionally, I'm concerned that this year in particular, I'm wondering what the identification will be based on testing alone. If by having it be once a year and at the beginning of 3rd grade when the kids are just starting to learn how to read and they've never taken a standardized test before, if this impacts their results as well. And not that I'm saying that we can't bolster it with outside identification. I assume that then we are even more reliant on teachers identifying students within the classroom. However, I understand that our historical pattern has been to primarily lend ourselves to the testing as the cutoff, in which case I think it's so important that if we're only going to have 1 year, that that year be the right year. Or if the cost of that 1 year is the same as testing in 2 years, we should just test in 2 years. And I know we're going to be having an expert come into town to talk to us, and I think that's wonderful that the district has engaged her. And I hope they use that as an opportunity to pick her brain on how best to do the identification, because if nothing else, we are required to do that as a district.
Thank you very much. Mr. Llewellyn. Mr. Llewellyn, do you have, how many minutes do you suppose you'll have?
What are you going to give me?
No, I need
No,
to, I
I'm
need to look
joking.
at the 11 o'clock, so it's a serious question.
Brief.
Excuse me?
I'll make it very brief. I've got
Okay.
like
Could we have
two real quick
one person
questions.
for public comment, possibly before, just to kind of make sure that that gets in? Mr. Chair?
Mr. Llewellyn?
That's fine with me, whatever you'd like to do.
So we'll go to public comment for the person who
Mr.
raised
Vitale?
their hand.
Christine.
Please come forward.
That's tomorrow.
I think some of them are waiting to hear what
So,
proposed amendments
okay,
board members
so-
might have for the budget
so
and comment on
tonight-
those.
Tonight, correct. Tonight, no, it is happening. Tonight, as you recall, we asked all board members to indicate if they are going to make any recommendations for additions or subtractions to the budget, so that, one, all of the board members will know that that subject is coming up, and they can be better prepared, and two, so that the staff can cost out what your proposal is, because they actually have the, quote, real numbers for staff and whatnot, and while we have budget numbers, we don't necessarily know what each individual staff person costs that might have an impact on it. So yes, we are going to do that, and so if you want to wait, feel free to wait until we get to that, and then we'll move on. You want to wait? Okay, fair enough. Mr. Llewellyn.
Well, it sounds like if we're going to go through all that, we might as well suspend the meeting now, right?
Say again?
We might as well suspend the rules now if we're going to be going through all the proposals. So I guess I make a motion to suspend the rules.
Till time certain, or?
No?
Is there a second?
You can reject it.
Is there a second? Mr. Fattabine, to suspend the rules for, with no time specified. Any comment on the motion? If not, are we ready to vote? No comment on the motion. It's an administrative motion, so I won't take public comment on it. All in favor of extending the meeting, raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Patton, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fatterbean. Whoop, you got Mr. Convertito, Mr. Fatterbean, and Mr. Llewellyn. All opposed. Ms. Carnell and Mrs. Maxon Kennelly. So the meeting is now extended, so Mr. Llewellyn, back to you.
Even though I've extended it, I'm not going to use a lot of time here. In my request, since you've put it on the next agenda for tomorrow night, I'd asked for the contract as it related to Whitson's, and it says that it had been previously distributed. I did search through my emails, and I did search through the website and didn't find it. That's why I asked for it. If you guys could point me to the direction of where that is, I'd appreciate it. Well, I can't locate it, though, electronically at least. So if someone could get that to me, that'd be great, if we're going to have that on the next agenda. And then I guess, before I ask any other questions, Mr. Dwyer, can you give us, please, what your expectations are for the format for the remainder of this meeting and for the next meeting? Because this meeting flowed a little differently from the agenda, obviously, for obvious reasons. If you could give us a little roadmap, that'd be great.
Yeah, my intent was to, after the last question, to ask board members to identify what changes, if any, they were planning on making to the budget, either additions or subtractions, so that the public will know what is on our minds and that the board members will know what might be on individual members' minds. I was going to also suggest that we need to know that so that we can adequately cost out the proposals, and we're not working with, I estimated it is this number, and the staff say, no, the real number is X, and so we ought to have a clear motion on the table. I would ask board members to type up what their motion is going to be so that we're not just verbally saying it, but each board member will have a copy of what it is that you're proposing. And you could work up the motion and leave the number blank so that the staff could fill in the number that's the correct number. And so once I went through that quick line, then I was going to go to the public for comment and then adjourn the meeting. And then Thursday, we would go through the budget, ask any final questions that people have based on either questions that they've asked and we're getting information back to you, or just other questions that we didn't get to. And then once we get to those questions and comments, then we would go through the amendments. And of course, each amendment will be a public comment period as well.
And you're expecting those amendments written today or submitted tomorrow?
No, tomorrow.
Okay.
Now, if you submit them at 6:45 tomorrow, it doesn't give the staff much time to work up the numbers, so I would hope that people have thought through what it is that they want to change already and could be putting those in the morning through an email that will confirm what it was that, send it tonight when you get home.
Out loud.
And if you say it out loud tonight and it's clear, then they can start working on it now, just as they were starting to work out the answers to the budget questions that you verbalized on Tuesday and then added to over the next couple of days.
Okay.
Is that,
No, that's
okay,
helpful.
sure.
Thank you. I guess the only last question I have, because I think we've kind of been up and down these the whole time. We had talked, I don't know, 2 months ago at this point, about the new roof at the high school and the solar panels. Is there anything on the solar panels? Do we have any savings in here, or is that?
We do. We estimated when the, and that actually goes back to Mr.
It does.
Convertito's question. Yeah, we estimated based on the coverage of those panels, which differs at the two high schools, estimated what the savings would be for each of those two buildings, given installation dates of October, November. It's not going to be the full fiscal year.
Of course.
And so we did subtract those savings from the electricity accounts for those two schools.
Okay, so they're in here already. Great, thank you. I'll, at this point.
Okay.
Which might explain why some of the high school numbers may be different, yes. It's like $60,000 to $80,000 a piece, some of that in that range.
6. Mr. Fattabine and Ms. Carnell, I think one of the two of you didn't have the first shot at starting the round. Do you wish to start, Mr. Fattabine, or Ms. Carnell? So, gentlemen, you will defer to the lady because she pointed to have you start. You don't have to make a...
deferred to me, it seems.
Correct. You don't have to make a decision, but you don't have to make a change to the budget. You're welcome to accept the budget
I don't
as
have to?
presented.
don't think
But
I'm
if you are
compelled?
going to make a change, please let both the public and the
I'm
staff
going to take the chair's
know.
advice. I'm not making
So-
any changes.
No, I'm not giving
have no
advice.
ch-
I'm
I have
just
no
telling you
changes.
what your options are. No changes you're proposing.
No.
Thank you. Mr. Convertito.
At the risk of receiving Mr. Cullen's ire, I will, I intend to propose 3 changes on the capital non-recurring, and that would be the light fixtures around the parking lot at Ludlow, the sound panels and exclosure. Actually, those are the only 2, simply because there's going to be so much construction going on at that site that I don't see that these issues, and especially with the solar panels going on and everything else, that I think these issues can be pushed off for another year because they're not really a need, they're a want. The Ludlow sound panels on the roof. And the parking lot perimeter lights for the student lot.
You said 2 issues, lights and the sound panels. Yes, all right, thank you. Mrs. Gerber? No. Okay. Now it is up to Ms. Carnell.
Okay, you got a pen and paper ready? Okay. And I raise you, Mr. Convertito. I would also, I have a hard time with I think it's $40,000 for locks at Ludlow High School. That's number 1. Number 2, I want to digest this whole thing with the world language, so I need to go over it and see where I feel from that, because it was helpful.
But that's a conversation probably around adding something, or are you thinking of subtracting something?
No, I won't subtract. I need to go back and look at
Correct.
exactly. There were 2 other issues. You know what? I can't give them to you now. There are 2 others, so
When you can't get to sleep tonight, just send in the email.
you got it.
And the world language, it would be helpful if you could get that in quickly so that you can figure out what direction you wish to go in. Mr. Patton?
I don't see any changes at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Lou McCormick?
I guess I'll add to the maintenance projects, and I'll have to say that the carpet at Jennings Library Media Center looked A-okay to me. We took a look at it, and it looks just fine. Though I'd say the main office still could use for a little upgrade there. So I don't know what the differential is in the pricing, but I'd like to have that carved out. Okay? And additionally, in Fairfield Ludlow, the White House office, I think, looked like it needed an upgrade. But I would say that I guess parts of the main office and the guidance suite didn't look so bad to me, though there was
Could you
some
be
talk.
clearer so that we...
Yeah, so I'd like the cost of the guidance suite and the main office broken out.
Doreen, did you get that? Is that the carpet in the guidance office?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
I mean, the main office.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. All right, so those would be subtracts. I would also like to suggest that I might consider the transportation for the pre-K program, which right now it looks to me as it's like $150,000. This is all for a subtract. I'll get to my ads in a little bit. And the transportation, as a general matter, I'd like investigated, though probably not prudent for this year since we don't have specific numbers laid out for that opportunity. though I would imagine that that could potentially be sizable. And then on the ads side, as mentioned, I'd like to consider on the table, I haven't figured out the numbers yet, but I'd like to consider, again, the world language, the music, and the gifted testing.
And again?
The gifted testing.
Testing.
What specifically on music? We need to cost that out.
I know. I will send you an email.
Okay.
But last year, if I recall, you were talking about the fifth.
That's what I'm going to send out. I'm going to think about
Yeah.
it based on what we
So you'll send in the music, what you have, so that it can get costed out.
I mean, all the details were laid out from last year
Yeah.
in detail, I
So-
remember.
And I'm wondering whether you and Ms. Carnell might be headed in the same direction with world language, and perhaps rather than have two independent
We might
suggested
discuss.
changes, it might make sense to you to put your heads together and
Yeah, I
put one in.
was going to say that. And may I?
Yeah, please.
What I wanted to say is, it's more of changes in the budget than cutting the budget. So I just want that clear when, I referred to the keys. That's not saying I want to give them back $40,000. I don't. Well, I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, you just want to spend it a different place.
Thank you. I
Yes,
just
right.
want, they're not getting it back.
And is that it?
If I come up with something else, which I might, I'll email it.
Yes. But if it comes in too late, it might not make it
What's
through,
the
if you
deadline?
will.
Well, I guess I could just throw it out
How
verbally.
about 1 this morning? How about 1 this morning?
Unrealistic.
Mr. Llewellyn?
I think my fundamental issue here is that we have a budget that's up basically $5 million, or almost 3.3%.
3 point. I think you said 2.3. It's 3 point. Oh, you did. I'm sorry.
But thank you for correcting me there. And I see that we are adding, an additional 12 heads, yet we have student count that is effectively flat going into next year. And frankly, we are starting to have somewhat of an affordability issue, I think, with where things are headed. We don't have metrics to assess how we are spending our money, whether we are spending it effectively or not effectively. We can't step back and say we're doing it correctly, but we are adding, and that's a concern to me when we can't step back and say we're adding here, we're going to redirect. The word restructuring was thrown out there today from an organizational perspective, but I'm not sure what metrics are driving a potential restructuring. I think if I look through here, there are ways that we can avoid incurring at least some of those additional costs in terms of headcount. And by no means, when we have the number of folks retiring and leaving, that it would ever be a reduction. It would just be less growth. So I think I will probably be sending in a couple of amendments related to alternatives for
Can you be
funding.
a little bit clearer?
Sure.
As to
So
what
if we're adding staff in certain areas, there are ways that can be funded, I think, without necessarily having to do it, or maybe we just don't need that staff. For example, if we're adding 6 teachers at the high school level, or 7 teachers, whatever it is at the high school level, do we really need to do that, or is there an alternative? Are we, that group is not being added at the freshman year. It's being added, that bubble, so to speak, is in the 10th and 12th grades. So those kids are taking electives more than not. So I'm not sure we actually need to add staff because we don't have class loading that's full. So it might be a nice to have, but not necessarily need to have. Given that we are talking about a restructuring in special ed, and that is, according to the EDO 1, which I think is a representation of our spend, it's about 25% of our budget overall. are we delivering the best services we can for the dollars? Do we need to have an audit of that before we go and do a restructuring? Are we providing the best services that are going to help the students the most? I'm not saying cut it. I have no idea. I don't know if we're spending enough or too much, because I don't know what outcomes are. That's something that's not been shared with this board. So, it would be good to understand what it would cost to do an audit, so we understand how we are spending our money and if we're spending it effectively. Are there programs out there that may be more effective than the programs we're using? I don't know. I'm not saying we're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying if it's such a large portion of our number and it's where all of our growth is, maybe before we commit to a perpetuity of headcount, we step back and do a formal assessment of it. Send out a parent survey. What does the customer say? Does the customer have thoughts? So I will probably be proposing a couple of amendments along those lines.
But at the moment, I don't think the staff have any specific direction from you as to where you might be proposing that, so you'll get that into us.
Yeah, it'll be evident, but if you could get if there's a cost of what it would cost to do an audit, that would be something that'd be good to know.
Which would be in addition to the budget that you
That's
want.
correct.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah, but that you'll send something in so that there's clarity, so that the staff can react to it.
if we could get an idea of what it would cost to audit the program, I will send in the words around that, but need to understand what that approximate cost is so I can come up with the funding for that.
Yeah, and you'd have to clarify as to whether you want to audit the entire school district,
Nope.
a level, grade level, a course level, something like that.
The whole special ed program.
Special ed program.
Can we be delivering better services for the same money? Can we be delivering the same services for less money, for more money? I don't know.
Okay, anybody, let's see, I started with Mr. Fattabine, so Mrs. Maxon Cannelli.
First, through the chair to Mr. Llewellyn, I just want to clarify for my own thinking. So on this page 142 in the budget book, which breaks out the .2 high school art, .6 high school reading, et cetera, it's not an explanation of that you're looking for. It's specifically on the special ed increase. Because this obviously would be something that a curriculum leader or somebody would need to be prepared to explain this. So that's why I'm curious if this is what you're targeting?
No.
Okay.
We need to provide the best services we can. And the question is, I as a board member don't know if we are or we aren't.
Okay.
Do we need to take a holistic approach? And as long as we're going through restructuring, is this the correct restructuring? I don't know that. But we're being asked to add 300,000 or so fully loaded of administrators to the budget.
Okay.
And that's going to be in perpetuity. So, I don't know if that's
I
right
just
or
wanted
it's
the
wrong.
clarification if it was solely focused on special ed or just general ed
Yes,
as well.
yes, but not general ed, because
Okay.
that's...
Okay, then the one information this will be amendment, but I'm curious if we could have those pension numbers in advance of the meeting, because that would be an obvious potential amendment with the medical retention numbers factored against the pension numbers.
Yes, we're expecting to get those numbers in the morning from Mr. Mayor, so I will have that out to the board as soon as I get them, so somebody could make that amendment.
Yeah. Because it's fundamental to the budget, I'll probably list that first and then just simply...
Right.
Okay.
What I might do is just go alphabetically board members, because I haven't tried that method of going around in order, so I'll probably just list them alphabetically and each one bring forth what you have. But we'll start with the medical and pension numbers.
The pension will be the easiest one because there's it's a number.
Right.
That's it. It is what it is. We're getting permission to reduce it. There's not really a lot of controversy.
And if I have anything else, I'll get it in by the morning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now to the public. If you wish to make a comment on any part of the budget or any part of our conversation over the last 2 days, please come forward, state your name and address.
Kelly Dunn, can you hear me? Kelly Dunn, 205 Tucker Lane, sorry. Just to get some clarity here, I sat through many Board of Ed meetings, many Board of Finance meetings, and many RTM meetings surrounding the discussion of special ed costs last year. And to my recollection, this board asked central office, and specifically Andrea Leonardi, to take a clear look at the way you are currently doing special ed and specifically dealing with the complex learners. And my understanding was you wanted her and central office to come up with a plan so that you didn't have 17 outplacements. That's my understanding. I could be wrong, but I really think that you need to get some clarity around this, because if you go and ask for an audit and you take all of that time and money to do that, you're not really directly addressing the budget that needs to be voted on tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please come forward, state your name and address. Thank you for your patience.
Bonnie Rotelli, Merritt Street. Forgive me, I have to read off my notes. I'd like to encourage the Board of Ed to support Dr. Title's proposed budget as presented. I also strongly support what Ms. Leonardi spoke about earlier. Special education in the district is understaffed, the population is growing, and the staffing support model proposed will help early identification and intervention, which will absolutely help to decrease consults and legal fees. I would also like to point out that the need for additional staff is not always driven by enrollment numbers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have somebody else who wishes to come forward? Please state your name and address.
Christine Vitale, 254 Vernon Hill Road. I'm just deciding what hat I should put on. I'm going to start with Fairfield LLPTA. We need the lights. If not, John, you have to come and walk me out of the building at night, down to my car, because it is pitch black. It is a safety hazard. I'm surprised someone hasn't fallen down the stairs on the side of that parking lot. The locks. To have a school that has all different keys to many different locks, it just seems common sense that that is a safety hazard and should be addressed.
Are we allowed to comment? No.
No.
To understand?
No, the answer is no.
No, okay.
The answer is no.
There's 3 locks. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
no, but the answer is no.
All right.
We can go after hours.
In terms of the special ed, I am the budget rep for SEPTA. I don't have a statement for them. But I do want to, just in terms of approach, we've talked about silos for this budget season, and I think that you can't put kids into silos. Many things in this budget can be put into silos, but you can't put kids into silos. There's not the special ed world here and the gifted world here and then that vast population of kids in the middle, because there's crossover. You could have somebody who tests as gifted, but they might have a special need. They might be brilliant in math, but be a struggling learner. You might have a child who is receiving services in one area, or maybe not academic at all, and is a gifted mechanic or artist or musician. So to take that very limited view of your world, our world, their world, I don't think that that really fits in with the mission, as I've heard it talked about at this board. And I urge you, as this budget goes forward, you set the stage for way our students are talked about by other town bodies. We look to you to set the tone of the way our kids are talked about, and we are relying on you to advocate as this budget moves forward. I ask for you to please accept the budget as proposed by the superintendent. I think that a lot of time and effort has gone into this on all levels, and as we've seen from years past, at the end of the day, really, the educators do know best about this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Please come forward, state your name and address. And again, thank you for your patience.
Do you guys ever get sick of seeing the same people over and over? Rhetorical question. Trudy Durrell, Woodcrest Road. Also would like to urge the board to take the budget as proposed. We've all been around the block enough to know that it will most likely get cut by other town bodies, at which point you're going to have some very difficult decisions to make. And I think that it's better if you wait until you know what your actual number is to make those decisions, instead of trying to nickel and dime yourselves now. In terms of world language, I fully support the expanded world language idea and philosophy. I absolutely support trying to put the world language at a minimum in 6th grade, and I think it's reasonable to only do that at this point in time. If anybody needs clarification on how that works, I'm happy as a mother of a 7th grader to explain sort of the ridiculousness of how world language instruction worked when my son was in 6th grade last year. So happy to fill you in if you don't know, or if you haven't gotten there yet, or if you just have forgotten. So please, I would urge you to support the proposed budget as presented.
Thank you very much. Please come forward and state your name and address.
Hi, Tricia Donovan, Fairfield. I would just have a few questions because this budget process is very quick. I would like to remind the board that the middle school gifted program has been underfunded for several years now. I think we cut $40,000 from that budget several years back, and we have not reinstated any of that, so we've really been working under capacity at that level. So please take a look at that, and maybe somehow we can shift some funds around. I would like to echo some of the statements made by board members asking for sort of a status update on staff additions. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago we put $1 million in the budget to add full-time math and ELA staff members at all the elementary schools and also at the middle schools, and we've yet to receive an update as to how that's affecting student achievement and teacher performance. I know that was put in to support students and teachers, and I would love to hear a report about how that's actually working. As far as foreign language goes, I would support the 6th grade program. I think we really need to put a full-time program in at 6th grade. The 4th, 5th, and 6th grade part-time program is not working at all, and offering the choice of French and Spanish at 6th grade is the right move to make. And I would also ask, do we hire teachers that are dual certified in language, or are we hiring simply foreign language teachers that are certified only in French, only in Spanish? Would it be more cost effective if we have dual certified? I don't know if that saves on the number of staff we hire. And also in terms of professional development going forward, I know we have a big high school schedule professional development move coming up, but have we even finished and adequately trained our teachers on all the new Common Core aligned curriculums, math and ELA at the high school level? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any of the 3 people over there walking forward. What about on this side of the audience? I see nobody coming forward, so thank you very much for your public comment. Back to the board. Any board members want to make one final comment before we adjourn? I have 1, 2.
Thank you.
Do that, or somebody makes a motion to adjourn, but at the moment, Mr. Llewellyn's been recognized.
I just want to clarify, and I'm not saying by any means we need to cut the special ed budget. I want to make sure that what we're doing is best for the kids, and because I truly do support getting all kids the help that they need. So I don't want anyone to then turn this later and saying that it's an us against them, and that it is different worlds. Well, I'm saying what we are spending, I would like to ensure that we are spending in the most fiscally responsible way.
Thank
you. I think an outside look in is always better than an inside look in, because there is a greater reference.
That's our argument to be made on Thursday with a
I'm
proposal.
clarifying because I don't want my
Mr.
words
Patton,
misconstrued.
do you have a final comment or not?
I look forward to that debate tomorrow, and
Okay.
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Mrs. Gerber? No, Ms. Carnell would like to be listed as the seconder, right? All in favor, raise your hand. All in favor, raise your hand. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Please do.